2007 edition of the City Council Redevelopment Agency. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 2 on the agenda are changes to the order of the agenda. It looks pretty good to me. How about everyone else? I think we're all set. It is a relatively few items tonight. Item 3, council communications and announcements. Matt, would you like to start?
Sure. I've got quite a few, actually. The first one is I did talk to Len Matterman, who's the chair of the Flood and Land Use Committee, and they are going to be reporting to us at our next council meeting, I believe, Mr. Mayor. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's scheduled, yes.
So I won't go into a whole lot of detail about my discussions with Len, but they have worked on all the things that we asked them to work on as much as they could. There were some things that they felt rather stifled on because of upcoming laws and things from the state that might be going on that the Public Works Director talked to them about. They also voted at their last meeting. I talked to him right before the meeting, and then I talked to him right after the meeting. And one of the things that they were looking at was whether or not they would like to continue with their work, because they see a number of things that are outstanding that still need to be done. And so at their meeting, they did take a vote on that and did vote to continue if that is the pleasure of the City Council for them to do that. I believe we could discuss that when they report to us at the next meeting. I also, in relationship to that, and I'm going to bring this up again when we're talking about economic development, but I did read an article that was in our mail. It came with the estuary brochure that we got in our council mail. And to make sure everybody saw the article, I had Christine make a copy of it. It's called Runoff, and it's about Seattle streets and how they have treated runoff differently and done some very innovative, economically friendly things to treat runoff and deal with it so that there's more absorption into the ground instead of it going into the creeks and causing flooding and so forth. And I know since we have had issues with flooding, I read it with great interest. I think it's something that we might want to take a look at. I was also going to pass this on to Len Matterman and let him have a look at it as well. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to make everybody aware of that. Mm-hmm. The next item was a letter that we all received, but I just wanted to highlight it because I think it's always good when we get commendation of our police officers and just to make folks aware of it. There was in the graffiti abatement work with the county, there was a fellow, Brent Wilson, who was working with our staff and went through knee surgery and had some pain and so forth. He gave us a letter, and he really commended three of our officers, Sergeant Rich Dickerson, Detective Tom Marinos, and Community Service Officer Dan Larson. And I thought it was especially interesting that in his letter he gives special thanks to Dan for some work that he was doing, and he says in his letter that he is now using his style of formatting these cases, and I thought that was pretty commendable to our individual and our police department. Right. So just wanted to highlight that. Also wanted to highlight the breaking news that we got with Stage Right, which is our children's theater. San Carlos Children's Theater has been selected for the Best of the Best in Bay Area Parents Magazine as the family favorite in children's theater workshops in the San Francisco Peninsula area, and I thought we should highlight that. And then, what was the last thing, I think? Oh, the last thing was has to do with Pax Christian, that we do have a class in the schedule that will come out in the fall. And in the meantime, we're having a booth, not every time we have farmers market, but a couple times a month we'll be having a booth there. I manned it last week Candace Richards, the teacher that went on the last trip. And we have T-shirts for sale, and we have poster boards with, pictures of things that went on there on that trip. So if folks are interested in that, they can stop by and talk to us.
And when will that next trip be?
Oh, thank you. The next trip is scheduled for October 12th through the 22nd. It's a 10-day period. We're not expecting everybody to go for 10 days. I plan to go for 10 days. But we tried to pick a long period of time so that folks could fit into that window somewhere. That's the idea.
Bob?
First, Mr. Mayor, I apologize for being tardy, and also to the other members of the council, I apologize. I have no communications or announcements, and if I did, I think Councilmember Grocott took most of it anyway, so I appreciate that, but no, I have nothing this evening.
Very good. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just say this has been my first public opportunity to thank all the citizens in San Carlos that came out and supported the screening for the Ed Foundation and for the Park and Rec Foundation. And it was a great night. We raised a lot of money. And I just wanted to personally thank everybody for their support, traveling all the way over to Pixar and taking a look at the film. So, again, my thanks.
I have a couple of items. I just wanted to acknowledge that we had a dedication at Pogos Ridge Open Space District a week ago Saturday. And it was a great opportunity to dedicate the new trails that they've just installed, the Dusky-Footed Wood Rat Trail and the Dick Bishop Trail. And so what this allows you hikers in the audience and at home to do is to do about a 4.5-mile hike through Pogos Ridge from the headquarters area up to Los Vientos and then back down along the ridge looking over 280 and then into the South Canyon area and back to your car. So it was a nice program and a great opportunity for us to reconnect with the Open Space District. Secondly, I wanted to also acknowledge the lunch that we had last Thursday with Hip Housing. This is a lunch that gave appreciation to cities that have supported HIP, as well as to recognize some of their volunteers and the good work they've done. Louise Almajor, the vice president of HIP, was there, and her staff did a wonderful job with the lunch. But we do have a certificate of appreciation for working with HIP Housing to help individuals and families find a place to call home in San Mateo County. And that's kind of an easy phrase, but it says an awful lot, because HIP Housing does a wonderful job with those who are disenfranchised from the housing market, whether they're too poor, or whether they have special needs, whether they can't live alone, whether they need home share. Those people that aren't otherwise served in the housing market can find help at HIP. They'll even do counseling for reverse mortgages if you'd like to stay in your house and use some of your equity. So there's a nice lunch. We got an appreciation certificate from HIP. It had a nice plastic frame around it, but regrettably I dropped it and broke it. So the paper survived my little dilemma. We also got a couple of certificates of special recognition, one from Tom Lancis and the other from our state legislature. This was from Ira Ruskin. Honor of your commitment for affordable housing and your selection as a special recognition award recipient. So it was a nice lunch. We've supported HIP for a good number of years, and as I say, it's done a great job for those who are otherwise not a part of our housing market. The third item is that I just want to remind the audience and those folks at home that you have one more week, one more Saturday afternoon to see the Art and Antiquities demonstration or presentation at our San Carlos Museum. 533, I think the address is on Lower Street. It's the old firehouse. And it's a very nice show. They have an open house from 1 to 4 on Saturdays, so this is your chance to see the art and the antiquities together. And then you all may be wondering what these are for. This is a fluorescent bulb, a 60-watt. This is saves you $37 in energy costs over the life of the bulb. It's a real deal, and it can be used for absolutely nothing. These are free, and the story is this. Yahoo put together a program called Be a Better Planet, is what they called it, and they sent out a national challenge to find the greenest city in America. And so our San Carlos Green Group picked up on this and decided that, well, there's really no reason we can't be the greenest city in America, and so they started to work the phones and work the email and get people to sign up. And at one time we were second in the entire country, and we ended up third. Now the interesting part of that is that there were 350 entries throughout the country. We were the third in the country, and we were the first in California. So we were first. Mill Valley happened to be fifth. We were in third place, but that made us first in the state. Mill Valley was in fifth place in the contest. But it's a great, it's a great privilege and a great honor for us. So, in return for our good effort and our high placements, they were here today. We had a little presentation, and they gave us 5,000 of these bulbs for distribution throughout the community. So, if you need a bulb or 2 or 3, all we ask is that you use them, take them home, and put them to good use. And the community will be better for it, the environment will be better for it, and we'll also always be thankful for the efforts of San Carlos Green in putting this together with the Yahoo competition.
Excuse me, Mayor Davids, maybe if staff or council have a bright idea tonight, we can just do this just before we... Just a thought.
We will have these available. We got 500 today. We'll get 4,500 in the next few weeks. They'll always be available as long as they're available here in City Hall. You can come by and pick them up in City Hall. We'll also have them at our outdoor events such as Farmers Market. And so you'll see a lot of these. But make sure you use them and do what's right for our environment. And I think that that's the last item I have, so thank you for your patience on those announcements. We'll move ahead now to reports to council. We have one item scheduled, which is an update on the Building Community Ad Hoc Task Force. I believe Brian's going to give us a brief presentation. After that, we'll have a little further presentation by one of our task force members. Very good, Barry. Very good.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. As council is aware, a couple of years ago, Councilmember Teagle Doherty founded an initiative known as Enhancing the City of Good Living, and as a result of that, several task forces were founded. After that event was complete, some of the task forces have reported out and have elected to become volunteer organizations after their term has ended. Tonight is a report on the Building Community Task Force. Barry Weiss, the Park and Rec Director, and I work with Mayor Davids on a report for the council tonight. It outlines the various projects that the task force wishes to undertake. The city manager has appointed Barry as the staff liaison for this project, and what we've done is we've outlined for you the tasks that the task force would like to take on. During your budget sessions last meeting, the council approved $5,000 for the staff to use to assist in this project. So while the task force has indicated that it is their intent to carry out this list of projects at no cost to the city will have some minimal amount of financial support available to work with the task force. So those are the highlights, and I don't know, Mayor, if there's anything you'd like to add, but Barry and I are certainly available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I have had the pleasure of working with this group during the last few months, and we've enjoyed bringing these items forward and beginning to work on them. This report was as requested when we solidified and continued with the task force group. And so it's really an update as to where we are on the individual items. Pat Potter is one of our members, and she's prepared to give a brief presentation of the committee's work. So, Pat, would you come forward and do that, please?
Thank you. Our group consists of Heidi and Jennifer Muir-Dixon and Pat Bell, who I don't see here, Mayor Davids and myself, and there's also representation from the Youth Advisory Council and the Parks and Recreation Commission. Our goal is to encourage San Carlos community to get involved and to bring the community closer together. There are several projects that we're looking at to start with. Jennifer is our chairperson heading up the research in First Night San Carlos. First Night is a New Year's Eve celebration for the entire family, and it includes games, music, theater, and art. The City of Monterey puts one on, and some of us have already made hotel reservations to spend New Year's Eve in Monterey to check it out. We think this could be a tremendous fund for San Carlins, and as well as a potential revenue source for hotels and restaurants with people coming from out of town visiting us. Another thing that we're looking at is town hall meetings, and our first town hall meeting is tentatively scheduled for mid-September, and I am leading this project and going to be putting together a proposal to see if it's feasible that our first topic be related to the economic development plan that was put together by RSG. If that goes through, the topic will be looking at alternatives outside of the big box solution to creating revenue for the city. RSG has stated that recruiting large and mid-plate retail should be the #1 objective of the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Yet the citizens of San Carlos have responded overwhelmingly that they do not want stores like Target's, Fry's, or Kohl's in San Carlos. The town hall meeting will focus on strategies of the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, or BALI, and this was an organization that RSG suggested that the city look into because it teaches towns and cities how to grow without having to rely on the big box chain stores solely for revenue. The town of Hollister has actually gotten together with BALI and looked at how they might be able to do to stave off just rapid development because they're really primed for it. Other projects we're looking into are downtown movie night, and we saw that Redwood City has just started one. And we're going to be opening up the kiosk that's in the San Carlos Park down on Laurel Street so that people can come and post items that are of interest to them. And we are also looking at how we can make neighborhood block parties easier to organize and hopefully less expensive. A future project that is really exciting, and I hope we'll be able to work on it, is developing a community emergency response team training program. And we also hope that to get a website link up so that we can encourage the community to contact us about things they're interested in, and we will be reaching out to the community through the city as our projects develop. That's pretty much it. Any
Very good.
questions?
Any questions for Pat?
I just want to thank you for a very thorough staff report that you gave us. I take it you were a part of that, and it was very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
I might mention that we do have a CERT training program. The chief is in the audience, and he could attest to that. But we don't do it as often as we think we should. So Pat's reference to the CERT or the community emergency response training is to make it more frequent, get more people involved, try to build up the total number of people that in town and households in town that are prepared in the event of emergency. Because as we all know, it's not if, it's just when. And we want to be there. We want to be ready. So any questions for Pat? You okay with all this?
Yeah, no, I just think the volunteer effort and the way you guys are sort of working within the budget and everything, yet still keeping momentum and spirit going is wonderful.
Great.
So thank you.
Thanks.
We do have a couple of alternatives here. We can put them in a different direction. We can improve their work, or we can improve their work with enthusiasm and encourage them to carry on. What would be your pleasure?
I make a motion for your third option there.
Very good.
To work with enthusiasm and carry on.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comment, and we do have two requests to speak at this time. First from Bonnie McClure.
Bonnie McClure, San Carlos. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and staff. As a member of the original task force initiated over 20 years ago by AUW and chaired by Tom Quinn, I wish to congratulate all of you on improving the communication between the staff and the City Council and our citizens. The streaming video keyed to the minutes is really neat on the computer. However, there's always a however, right? When I tried to find replays of the June 11th council meeting on the Channel 27, it was advertised that there would be replays, and there usually are on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or Sunday, but there were no replays. And it's much easier for citizens to watch a big TV screen, even if they have a small TV screen, it's bigger than usually their computer screen. And you see the overall picture better on the TV, and I wondered why there were no replays. If you had substituted the streaming video for it, or?
Through the chair, the city has a rather old, I guess would be a charitable way of saying it, replay system for Channel 27. The IT staff is working with administrative services on updating it, and the good news is through our recent franchise agreement with Comcast, we did get money for that. So hopefully in the not-too-distant future, we'll have a brand-new system which will be more reliable than what we have today. So I guess the bottom line is we're working on it.
Okay, because I was afraid you were substituting the computer for the
No.
movie. Okay, well then I congratulate you and get with it, okay?
Okay, Brian, thank you. I told my wife I said something clever about my grandkids, and so she's been looking at Channel 27 ever since and hasn't found the replay either. So she'd be glad to hear that. I'll put it onto the computer and let her watch the video. Scott Moisters is next up.
Hi, my name is Scott Marsters, and I'm president of the Loreola Association. A little bit later this evening, we're going to talk about future economic development. But before we talk about it, I'd like to bring to your attention again several existing issues. The first is shuttles. Since the last time I spoke several months ago, I'm curious as to what has happened. I know that the Traffic and Circulation Commission has not had it on its agenda, so I'm kind of curious as to, is that in the process? Is there any plan to do anything about dealing with the issue of shuttles on the east side and the problems that we've been having?
You're talking about the current shuttle, Scott,
Yes, I am.
and the cut-through issues?
Absolutely, and, you know, the fact that they park there and don't turn the shuttles off and things like that. And it constantly is a battle to get them to deal with that. And so I had a brief conversation with the city manager about it, but I'm just wondering if there's any plan to do anything about it.
Okay. Mark, you want to make a comment? Or?
Just through the chair, I mean, what we have done is we've talked with the provider of the service, and we've also had discussions with the police department to monitor that activity. And I guess, in all honesty, we were told that that communication would be passed down to the new bus drivers because there's been some turnover within the staff. We thought that the issue had been addressed. If there are still ongoing problems, then I would encourage that communication to staff, and we'll follow up on it.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
I guess my question would be, is there a way to sort of formalize that?
Why don't we try again and give you a formal report as to what we have been able to do, and hopefully we can make it right.
The second issue I'd like to talk about is the speed on Old County. And let me start by giving you a few quick facts. There are only 3 streets in San Carlos with 35-mile-per-hour speed limits: El Camino, Industrial, and Old County. Of these, El Camino Industrial are 2 lanes in each direction. Old County has 1 lane in each direction. No other street in San Carlos with residential fronting it has a speed limit of more than 35 miles per hour, and that includes Alameda, Britain, and San Carlos Avenue. In Belmont, the speed limit on Old County is 25 miles per hour. In Redwood City, it starts off at 25 miles an hour and goes to 30 miles an hour, probably due to the school. There are approximately 20 35-mile-per-hour speed limit signs on Old County, roughly 10 in each direction. There are 6 on Industrial, and there are 6 on El Camino. Recently, we've had several major accidents on Old County. Again, I brought this issue up several months ago, and I haven't seen anything being done, so I'm asking where this is in the process.
Okay. Mark?
You know, that one I'm not as current on. I'd have to defer to Parvis.
Thank you. Speed limits are supposed to be set by the law, which is the California Vehicle Code. The California Vehicle Code requires, if you want to enforce the speed limit on the streets with radar, you have to survey the speeds and set the speed limit at 85th percentile. And we have done that for years, Industrial Road, all the streets that Mr. Marshall talked about. Just changing the signs does not change the behavior of drivers, and changing the signs to a lower speed, it cannot be enforced by radar. This is all dictated by California Vehicle Code. And if you drive an Old County Road in Belmont, there are parking available on both sides, there are a lot of businesses, and really you cannot go faster. So if you do a speed survey there, 85th percentile probably will come around 25 miles per hour. And Redwood City is only less than a short block, just with a sign, and it's not enforceable because it's not enforceable by radar, and it's not enforceable by clocking drivers. So this is all dictated by the California Vehicle Code.
So my question is, what can we do to slow down traffic on Old County?
Well, perhaps we ought to agendize this for a little more discussion, a better understanding of
That's what I'm
the
hoping
rules
for.
are. Okay.
The last thing I'd like to talk to you about again is the Holly Street widening. I asked at a past...
Holly Street what, sir?
The Holly Street widening.
Widening, okay.
So at a past city council meeting, I asked at a past city council meeting that if Holly is to be widened, that the city work with the residents to find ways to make it safer for them. I know that money has been set aside in the budget to potentially widen Holly. I'm asking once again, before any process starts, to please include the residents whose lives will be affected by this in the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comments at this point? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine, will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, public, or staff request specific items to be removed for separate action. Any members to be removed by the council?
Items, three items, items 6C, 6H, and I.
6C, 6H, and I. Okay. You need to be removed by staff. Anyone in the public like to remove anything? All right, we'll move those three items that Matt brought up to the end of the agenda and proceed with the items that are open.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 6A, B, D, E, F, G, and J.
Second. Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. May I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Brocott?
Yes.
Mayor Davids?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I have one request on these consent calendar items. I'm not sure how late the chief of police plans on staying in our meeting, but that's one of the items, is simply for him to report on the grant program and the hiring of the police officer. He might.
Well, we don't want to keep the chief here longer than he would like, so why don't we reorder this item and take it up now, if that's okay with the council? All right?
6H?
6H. 6H is the expenditure of up to $150,000 in supplemental law enforcement special funds from fiscal years 25, 26, 26, and 27 for the hiring of one or more additional police officers. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor Davids, members of the City Council. I just want to say for the record, I will always stay as long as you guys want me to. So,
Thank you. Well said. Well said.
Okay?
Yes.
But thank you very much. As you know, over the past few years, the city's had some serious budget difficulties, and every department in the city has had to take some cuts, and the City Council has had some very difficult decisions to make along the way. As a result of those cuts, we were in a position to cut 5 police officers, 4 officers, and 1 sergeant. But fortunately, we do have grant money available that will allow us to restore at least one of those positions on a full-time basis. I remember being here before council before. I think we were talking about the dispatch issue, and the council, I think if I remember right, it was Councilmember Lewis, looked at me and said, you know, if we ever get to the point, Chief, where we need to talk about PD staffing levels, I need you to come forth and tell us. And so part of the reason we're doing this and part of the reason I'm before you tonight is to let you know that I believe we're there. I believe it's important for me as Chief to talk to the council and to let you know that it's important to use this grant money, I believe, to restore that position. As you can see in the staff report, there are some measures being taken by the police department to take a look at the impact on staffing issues, and we're doing the best we can to mitigate any negative outcomes from that. But I think restoring this position using grant funds will be helpful. Also, we may be able to, under certain occasions, actually be able to overhire another officer. We're down to 32 now. The grant will take us to 33. If we have an anticipated vacancy coming, we might be able to pre-hire in anticipation of that vacancy so that officer is up online when that vacancy occurs. That's another way that can help us with the staffing levels. So what we'll do as staff is we'll take a look at where we are year-to-date on the budget, where we are at our staffing levels, how much money we have in grants, and make some decisions about how we can keep the staffing levels as high as we can in the police department.
Okay. Questions, Mayor?
Just a single question. Are we talking about the sergeant, or are we talking about one other position?
We're talking about an officer. Right now, it's my belief that it's more imperative to restore the officer position. I mean, it seem counterintuitive to you, but it's more imperative to restore the officer position than it is the sergeant position at this time.
Thank you.
Chief,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. You go ahead.
I just had a quick question. Certainly, no qualm about this. I was ready to vote for it without discussing it, but since it's out here, if you're using grant money, can we anticipate this grant money to continue, or is this just a one-year, gosh, we have it, and I don't mean we shouldn't spend it because it's here, but how does that foresee into...
Looks pretty secure, but it's $100,000 a year. That doesn't support a full-time police officer. And also, the police department has used this COPS grant money for a lot of capital expenditures. For example, the new computer-aided dispatch system and our new records management system, none of it was funded by the general fund. All of it came from grants, and a lot of it came from the COPS grant. So we have to be careful about robbing Peter to pay Paul when we spend it. But the short answer is, yeah, we can expect that, I believe, certainly in the next several years. However, because of the way the grant is, you will always see me bring it forward outside the budget process because the grant requirements are such that we cannot consider this grant during the budget process.
Again, it's just a matter of, I guess to cut to it simply, and I didn't mean to be verbose about it, but if we hire an officer, do you anticipate that we won't be able to keep this officer? Or is this just a one-time, we have it for a year, and then we're going to have the same problem next year?
Currently, we're budgeted for 32 police officers. Using this grant, I expect to hold the police department, do my best I can to hold us at 33 instead of 32. And I expect to be able to do that for a long time. However, not forever at $100,000 a year, but we should be able to do that. And already I anticipate 2 openings that I know of this year, or actually 3 coming up between now and December. So the openings are already there.
Okay. Again, I don't mean to beat you on this.
No problem at all.
It's great, and it's great to have another officer on the street or wherever you're going to put that officer. It's great for 1 year, or do we anticipate going on? That was the only question. Thank you. You answered it.
Okay.
I think so. I hope that the economy and revenue flow will shift our direction. We'll have money enough to hold on to this position as years go on. But it is, it's a one lump sum, and the lump sum will be used for the police officer. And then we'll hope for better revenue next time around.
All right.
Any questions? All right.
Make a motion to approve this item.
Second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Okay, item 7A is, item 7A is consideration of adopting the City Economic Development Plan.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Just to give you a little brief history on this item before we bring up the folks from RSG. Last year, we did 2 things moving towards an economic development plan for the city. First of all, we had an update of the city's real estate market study done by Bill Lee of Economic Research Associates. That program was put together with the assistance of the city staff and also the Economic Development Advisory Commission. 2 members of that commission, Scott Marsters and Mark Luckenbach, are in the audience tonight. And as this item is heard, you may wish to talk to Scott and Mark. In November, the Bill Lee report was presented to council, and you adopted that report. That document then proved to be the basis for the economic development plan. The City Council, and upon a recommendation from EDAC, hired the firm of Rosenau Spivacek Group, or RSG, to present that document. Council will recall that we had a public meeting, survey, and other documents, and along the way we had 2 meetings with EDAC to consider the plan. The plan was unanimously recommended to you at the EDAC May meeting. As part of that action, EDAC unanimously selected 5 priority areas that Mr. Spivacek will talk about in more detail in a minute. And in addition, they also shared with staff and with you a series of additional observations on directions they would recommend to the City Council and the community. And Mr. Spivacek will talk to those as well. So we're bringing the report to you tonight for adoption, and also we would be interested in the Council's commentary about both EDAC's top 5 recommendations and also their additional commentary. So with that, let me turn the table over to Mr. Spivacek and his associate, Alexis Smittle. They have a brief PowerPoint they'd like to present to you to get into some detail on the plan, and then afterwards both the folks at RSG and myself will be available for any questions the Council may have.
Through the Chair.
Yes.
One question before we get started on this. The recommendation, as it's stated, is that we would adopt this. The alternatives do mention that we might adopt it with some amendments or provide staff with alternative direction. My question on process before we get going on this is there are some matrices and pretty detailed information in here. If we were to throw out some information tonight from the Council on a little bit different direction, would we then expect to see it come back with, an alternative matrix, or how would we look at this? Is this a draft and we'll get a final later, or what are we doing here?
I think it's, through the Chair, to Councilmember Grocot's comments, I think it's our intent that tonight we would get Council's comments, and any amendments that the Council may make would be incorporated into a final report. Just so you know, in May, when we presented the draft of this report to EDAC, they did suggest some changes and amendments which are incorporated into the version you see tonight. So I would anticipate we would do the same for Council. I guess the question is, and maybe we'll know better when we see the amendments you may make, as to whether you wish to give us specific amendments and we'll just incorporate them, or whether you literally want to see the amended document back. Staff would be happy to do it either way.
Thank you.
All right. Good. Thank you. Frank?
Well, we'll see if this thing ramps up here. And it's not doing that. Ooh. Pardon? Oh, okay. Bear with me here for a moment while I get this going, and we'll look at the fish in the process. Here we go. Thank you. As Brian stated, for the past 10 months we've been working on this plan with your community as well as your staff. And our efforts to date have been to build upon the ER8 market study and move forward with developing a strategy and plan based in part upon that market study and based in part upon the input that we received from the focus group discussions that we've had, from the community forum that we had, as well as the survey that was made available via the Internet. This economic development plan really is an effort that you guide as the City Council to staff, and the community guides you all to move forward and try to invest your funds in a judicious manner so you can try to grow your revenue base and determine the future of this community. What we do is we bring the experience that we've gathered in doing plans like this for a variety of other cities throughout California, as well as the ERA market research that was showing the type of demand for specific uses in this part of the peninsula, and bring all that together to focus your efforts and guide you in a business plan. Your redevelopment agency has some resources that can be invested through this process, and our end goal is to try to create an environment here in San Carlos where we're stimulating private sector investment in order to enhance city revenues. There's been a lot of discussion over the past year and a half that we've had the opportunity to work here for your community about how we can grow the revenue base of this community to maintain existing services as well as expand them where necessary. And what we're hoping to do here is to create a strategy that won't be static, but instead something that will be revisited every year, something that will be modified as market demand shifts, community sentiment shifts, and something that will guide you and future communities or future councils in moving forward and investing the revenues that you have available. Our goals were to create a document that first year we can start doing things, or you can start doing things in terms of actionable items to lead you forward in an economic development effort. In addition, this plan sets forth priorities for the next 3 years, and finally, it provides a framework for annual reviews and updates, and that's extremely critical. We've created, again, a variety of plans for a variety of cities and redevelopment agencies. Those that have had success, given our history, have been those that have embraced this and used this for the community's best effort. Those who have not had a lot of success are those that adopted it, placed it on the shelf, and then never went back and revisited it. We ended up focusing the plan on 5 areas of the community. One deals with city operations and how to evolve city staff and perspective and service delivery to embrace economic development. The second area deals with downtown and the opportunities that are there, particularly given the fact that you own property downtown adjacent to some properties that are ripe for new development opportunities. Third, the El Camino corridor, and in particular the potential for the developments at the Samstram site and what that could do in terms of a bridge to downtown as well as bringing additional users or patrons into your community. Fourth, the east side, and there's a lot of debate about what should be done on the east side in terms of the type of uses that should remain, whether or not there's a benefit to attract new users to that area and who those users should be. And finally, the harbor industrial area. That one we elected to defer any major effort until the PAMP issue has been determined. That will determine a lot of what occurs in the harbor industrial area, and as such, until that is decided, our efforts were to recommend focusing on the other items until that comes about. Here on this map, we identify the various geographical areas that we're looking at, and to help me out here, I'd like to ask Alexa to come up now and just get into some of the particulars that we found for each one of these areas.
Good evening. To begin with city operations, we're just going to go through our 5 areas and talk about some of the highlights. One of the greatest assets here in San Carlos is your Chamber of Commerce and your EDAC. You have some wonderful people in those groups that have been very helpful during this process, and we believe that they can be built upon to work with the city, with the agency, with the Harbor Industrial Association to move forward with some similar goals towards economic development. These groups are already working in this capacity, but in their own separate realms. So by working together with the city, you do 2 things. First of all, you can promote the city in a more organic, whole fashion, and you also can alleviate some of the burden on city staff itself. Infrastructure deficiencies, they exist in this community and we think you should just go ahead and fix them. It's not going to get better, and I've learned from city staff that you are on this path with your next budget, working on some of the infrastructure problems that you have. Lack of financial resources and human resources here in the city, been under some budget stress for several years, and we think that leveraging your existing resources is the best next steps you can take, and the 2 major ones would be to, again, build upon those partnerships with other groups, and also to leverage your redevelopment agency funds and go out for a bond issue to create some capital to work with. The community desire to go green has been building. You have your green group already. You have wonderful light bulbs showing your progress already. There are terrific other groups out there that you can work with to make some of these initial steps and lay the groundwork for moving forward. And eventually, I think what the city would like to do is really be strong in recruiting green businesses and implementing green building policies and standards for all new development and redevelopment in the city. So by laying the groundwork, those would be your next steps to be able to walk that walk. And finally, the disconnect between city staff and the public is something that was brought to our attention through our discussions with community members and at the February 28th community meeting. And we believe that whether or not these are just misunderstandings or if they really are a disconnect, they should be addressed as soon as everyone understands what the issues are. It'll be a lot easier to get past them. And certainly appointing an ombudsman, as you saw in our plan, was something we recommended, someone that could be neutral and work with the staff and the business community as well. Your downtown is a wonderful amenity, but you do have some turnover in your businesses. We have heard from some business owners that they've struggled to maintain sales, and we suggest a two-pronged approach to this, essentially activating the Wheeler Plaza site as well as the former Bell Market site. In a sense, they would serve as anchors of the street, one drawing consumers down to the other end. You have all your stores and shops that are in between there, and that would be a great place to start. By working with those two sites, you build up the middle as well. Lack of draw to downtown. Your El Camino Real hosts commuters every day, passers through to neighboring cities. This is a consumer base that you can tap into a little bit further, and the effort there would be to draw those commuters and those passerbys off of El Camino and into the downtown to patronize your shops and restaurants. The communities have some conflicting visions of downtown. On one hand, it's a wonderful, it's quaint place to spend your day. You can walk down, get a sandwich, look around. On the other hand, there's not really that anchor type of tenant that might bring more customers in the long run. So what we suggest is to start with a middle ground, and that would be to recruit activity type businesses. And this is a recurring theme that we heard at the community meeting as well, that people would like something to do. Things might be a brewery was a very popular item, a bookstore, a winery, a wine bar, something that people can actually head downtown that would bring them in and provide something to do, preferably with live music, perhaps jazz, something, an entertainment faction that would contribute. On the El Camino Real corridor, this ties in significantly to the downtown. The Samtrans development is a wonderful opportunity for the city because you can essentially piggyback on what Samtrans is trying to do. And so you can take advantage of that project. The most important thing here would be to start consulting with the developer on a regular basis, to work with them to identify potential users in some of their retail space, things that would be complementary to the downtown. I'd hate to get into a situation where both, the downtown and Samtrans are vying for the same type of client. You want to work with them to make it more cohesive. A lack of identity was something we heard quite a bit for the El Camino. You do actually have a landscape plan that was written several years ago. We can take a look at that, decide to implement it, and if not, to go ahead and rewrite one that would provide more of an identity along the El Camino Real. And the Samtrans development ties into that as well because it really will be a landmark feature and something that identifies San Carlos, and another reason to really get involved in the project. And your vacant properties determine users that are complementary to the downtown and would work within the corridor. This is a little bit of a graphic trying to illustrate what we're looking at when we're thinking about drawing people into the downtown, utilizing the Samtrans project there. That Wheeler Plaza, if activated, would be a focal point that passersby, that people using the train, that the new residents would really be able to look down the street and see something that they want to go check out. So that would draw people down into the downtown onto Laurel, and then the reactivated Bell Market site at the far end to draw them down. And these would be first steps. It wouldn't be your final plan. You would also want to really activate the El Camino corridor as well. So this would be the place to start. The east side, one of the biggest goals of economic redevelopment is to alleviate some of the burden on your general fund. One of the ways you do that is by increasing your sales tax revenue. We understand that you are quality city and you want quality users, and it would be a special type of user that needs to be attracted to the east side. But you do have the San Carlos Marketplace right now building a synergy on that part of town, and we think that this is a great opportunity to go ahead and take advantage of that. The biotech and R&D is something that the ERA market study suggested that you may have a good capacity to bring into the city, and given the uses that are already existing in the east side, we believe that it's definitely something you should try to pursue because you do want to have that healthy job mix into the city. And the TOT revenue development of a hotel on a landmark site, this does tie in a bit to PAMF on some level. The ERA market study anticipated you would be able to start capturing a certain amount of hotel rooms in approximately 5 years. But if the PAM facility were to go through, you'd probably want to look at doing that a little bit sooner. And the harbor industrial area, as Frank mentioned, is something that we didn't focus on particularly because we wanted to see what the PAMP development would do first. There is some disconnect between Harbor Industrial Association and some of the other groups in town, and we would hope that they could be drawn more into perhaps a working group that involved the HIA Association as well as EDAC, the city staff, the Chamber of Commerce. And also, again, similar to the east side, to maintain the job base that exists by keeping the flexible land space and some of the light industrial uses that you have there. When we brought this plan to the EDAC, we did 2 sessions. They were a week apart. The first one was essentially us presenting the plan and talking about some of their questions. The EDAC committee members went home and during that week prioritized all the things that they thought individually were most important to San Carlos. They returned these results to Brian, who calculated them for us. And these top 5 really were very clear priorities for the EDAC as a whole, even though each individual member chose his own priorities. The first one was recruit large and mid-plate retail to the east side, followed by the Bell Market, Samtrans, Wheeler Plaza, and developing the Landmark Hotel.
In closing, we're here tonight, and perhaps if there's significant changes another evening, to have you review, discuss, vet, and finally adopt this plan. Again, that's just the first step. The next step is to take it and put these things into motion, and it'll probably take a good 6 months to sit down, talk with the individual users, the individual tenants you might want to bring in here, developers and property owners, to bring them to the fore and get them focused in on what to do with their development sites. After this occurs in terms of the adoption, then we move forward to implement the first-year recommendations. One of them is to assemble a financing team to look at how you may be able to use your redevelopment agency to generate capital for investment and economic development in that. Another recommendation in action would be to then align this with the 5-year implementation plan for the redevelopment agency. The evening that we held a public hearing on that plan, there was discussion of how that document fit with this effort and whether or not that document should be adopted at that time, given the fact that this economic development plan effort was still underway. At that point, we recommended, in order to satisfy state requirements, that the implementation plan be adopted, and then we come back and revisit it in a midterm review, which we're recommending here. And finally, and perhaps most important, is this effort generated a lot of interest by the community, by merchants, by property owners, and by the committees here that serve you in this economic development initiative. As the speaker said earlier, there's an effort to try to do a community forum in September to further discuss some of the recommendations contained in herein. So what we'd recommend also is to build upon that interest in moving this plan forward and, again, keep the community engaged, because at the end of the day, what we're doing here is defining what San Carlos will be tomorrow and for the future. And with that, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. A very good report, and I know the council members and others around the community have enjoyed reading it and thinking about what it might mean for our future. Before we question you, Scott, would you like to tell us what's on your mind, and then we'll move into discussion of the report?
Thank you. My name is Scott Marsters, and I'm chairman of the Economic Development Advisory Commission. And one of the things that I particularly liked about this plan, and it was one of the reasons that I eventually got involved in EDAC again after it was kind of went through the reorganization, was that it's a living document. It's something that we intend to come back to very frequently. And what you saw were our top 5 priorities. in most of those cases, we were actually looking at the idea of the fact that you guys were in your budgeting process, and we needed to look at including potentially money to work on some of those projects. We have yet to spend as much time as I would like on some of the more details, some of the finer points of the plan. But that's the beauty of having a living document, is we get to continually come back to it and work on it. There were two things that I'd like to touch on here real quickly. The first is that we talked a little bit about mixed development throughout the community. And EDAC essentially decided that, from our point of view, nowhere in the community should we limit mixed-use development. It ought to be considered everywhere. And that, we think, will shake out over time and figure out where it best works. The second thing I was going to talk about was the large plate retail, which was obviously the most popular amongst members of EDAC, and where it potentially could be located. And in the East Side Specific Plan, it was potentially going to be located from Britain south to Redwood City. In Bill Lee's plan, it sort of was from south of the Landmark Hotel down to Britain. In both cases, what I see is that the Britain interchange there is really the center point of that, and that as we move on in time, we will see whether it grows south or whether it grows north. But that partly is going to be due to the market forces and what properties become available. So I don't know if you have any questions for me, but that's all I have.
Well, we may well have in a short while. Thank you. Well, why don't we talk to Frank a bit, and we will have an opportunity for public input after our presentation, a bit of discussion here. So if you have questions on the plan, or you have comments, just keep them in mind, and we'll get to you soon. Any questions for Frank?
Got a lot.
Well,
I just have a lot of discussion. I'm not sure about it.
Okay. You want any specific?
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't you
I
go
might
ahead
just
and
go through.
take the lead.
I didn't write them down. But as I go through the report, I do have a number of questions I wanted to ask. The first one was when I was reading the final minutes of EDAC from May 16th, a fellow, Mark Green, suggested quantitative measures to determine if we are successful in the future of our economic development suggestions. And he had some ideas of revenue, quality of life via survey, air pollutant levels, noise levels. And I didn't see that necessarily picked up on, or did I miss something? I'm not sure.
No, you did not. The EDAC did discuss quantitative measures, and part of what occurred, as I remember it, and I probably should get Scott here to, as chair of that discussion, to maybe I'll defer to Scott on that one.
Okay.
Let me just grab this.
Thank you. Yes, that is actually something that we're working on right now, and we've actually set up a joint committee between EDAC and the Chamber to kind of format an outline for that, so that in the future we can actually bring back to you some sort of metric that will allow you to look at a project. Does it have does it meet an unmet need that the community has? Does it provide us with something that we're still working on it. It's just one of those things that it's going to take a lot of work, because you need to put measurable things in there, in some cases for things that are hard to measure.
Excuse me, if I might join into that. Obviously, we're pleased to see within the plan some first-year objectives, and several of which seem quite measurable and quantitative in a way under that objective. So it felt like to me there was I was happy to see there was an element of that already involved.
But the metric we're really looking at is looking at an individual project. Okay, so
more
in other
definition
words,
within those.
right? So,
absolutely.
For example, the Samtrans project. Okay, we'd be able to look at it and say, does it improve quality of life? Does it provide?
Understand. Great.
Okay.
You bet.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Very good. No, that's good. And I can tell you, if she were here, Councilmember Doherty would be interested in that one too, because I've heard her mention that before on when we've looked at different things as far as having accountability and measurable things. And then in public comment at that same meeting, Bob Black expressed concern over big box retail, and then he went on to say that he thought we should look at what is our identity. And actually, I remember back when we were interviewing for city managers, and our city manager that we hired actually talked about one of the questions during the interview process was, what's a weakness that you see in San Carlos? And his answer was, you need to brand yourselves. You haven't branded yourselves as a city. And that's essentially the same thing that Mr. Black was saying, is that we need to have some branding going on here, that you can identify San Carlos. When you think of San Carlos, you think of, and you can name it. When I think of Palo Alto, I think of Allied Arts. When I think of Palo Alto, I think of, their downtown and the kind of shopping district they have and the old theater. And, there's things that come to mind when I think of Menlo Park, same thing. Of course, right now I think of empty auto lots when I think of Menlo Park. But each city, has made that attempt. But I didn't, again, maybe I missed something, but is there an element of this economic development plan where we're looking for some kind of branding of the city of San Carlos?
We did not get into specifically branding the city. What we could see is that would come as part of the implementation efforts. From our perspective, our personal views, your branding is strongly identified with the Laurel Street corridor in the downtown area. It's very unique. Certainly Palo Alto has a downtown, but it's of a different vernacular. The same with San Mateo and the other communities. But in terms of branding, there wasn't anything that came up or bubbled up that just said, this is what San Carlos is.
Okay. Now I'm going to turn over to your actual report. On page 1, under El Camino, it talks on item 2 to implement landscape and design concept for the corridor. And my question was if there's a way we can put that together also with our flooding and watershed issues. And I would turn you also to the article, which I know you haven't seen, but the one that I brought for council tonight that Seattle is doing, where they're looking at how to deal with watershed issues, flooding issues, with pretty creative stuff on planting and native plants and so forth. And I think we should look at this type of project and the implementation of it, and I think we should tie that issue into this economic development plan, if we might. Now, we can discuss it as council members, but I guess I'm just asking you, if that was looked at all during the discussions that went on either with EDAC or amongst yourselves with staff and so forth?
No, we did not.
Okay. So perhaps we can discuss that a little later on when we get to discussion. Apologize for not having all these written out and having to leaf through, but spent a lot of time reading and not much time writing. When I get to page 10, we're talking about engaging partnerships, and I agreed completely with Jeffrey Stern on the committee that this should be a priority to build partnerships. Mm-hmm. And it's mentioned here about HIA, the Chamber of Commerce, and certain city staff. My question is, any thought to having as a partner specifically, and not just leaving it as certain city staff, to include Parks and Rec? Because Parks and Rec is also going through a master plan process, and it seems to me there's a tie there of Parks and Recreation, especially if you talk to Mr. Weiss, he'll tell you this, and economic development. For instance, one of the things that this community has talked about for years, and it's reflected in my council reports tonight about children's theater, is having an indoor theater for adults and children productions, and an outdoor theater in one of our parks, an amphitheater type setting where we can do Shakespearean plays and so forth. And that ties into economic development, because when people come into town to do those kinds of things and watch those kinds of things, they spend money, they have dinner, they sometimes they even stay overnight. So I guess my question is, any consideration for incorporating Parks and Rec and adding that to the matrix?
I would see no problem with doing that.
Okay.
It was not anything that surfaced directly or indirectly in the activities that we undertook, so that's why it's absent from the plan at this point in time.
Mr. Mayor, might we hear from our Parks and Rec director on that for just a brief moment?
You want to go ahead and you want to do that now?
If he has any
Would
input
you
on
like to
that.
comment on being a part of this?
Well, supporting economic development is part of the mission of Parks and Recreation, and if we could be of any help at all, we would be more than happy to, because economic development is so important for this community. So we stand ready to assist in any way we can.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I was just going to add through the chair, in response to Councilmember Grocot's question about the harbor industrial area, the chamber has reached out to them, and they have appointed an individual, Michelle Margiotta, to serve on this joint effort. So Harbor Industrial has checked in on this.
Okay, good. All right, Frank, back to you.
And we can discuss it a little later, but I think one of the other items we might want to add to the partnership is perhaps some major employers in San Carlos. And what comes to mind is Nectar, Tesla Motors, some things like that we might want to look at when we talk about these partnerships. When I get to page 13, this is addressing operational objectives, and right at the bottom of the page, task Public Works with prioritizing projects to address traffic circulation issues at Highway 101 and Holly Interchange. And I'm wondering, would there be any consideration for adding flooding mitigation, since we're looking at watershed right now, or on our agenda tonight is an RFP for that. And it was mentioned as an infrastructure issue. And so any reason, and maybe that's for Parvis, but any reason we can't add flooding mitigation as one of the first-year strategies, or if not first year, certainly within the some of these you had a 1-year strategy and a 3-year strategy.
There would be no problem with doing that.
Okay. So we could, Mr. Mayor, look at that and discuss that as well. Then when I get to page 19, at the bottom of the page, I was having a little trouble where it says Wheeler Plaza within the sight line of the railroad development. And was that talking about, like, if you're on the train that you'd be able to see Wheeler Plaza?
No, when you would exit the train, you would be able to be in the corridor there where the center of the Sam Strand development is proposed, and then if there was a way to catch the view of the patrons there to say, well, what's that going on at Wheeler Plaza? Let's go down and explore that part of the Laurel Street corridor. Because basically, when you're sitting on a train and it's whizzing by or you're stopping, there's not enough time to make the decision, well, I'm going to get off here and see what that is. So it's instead having enough eye appeal at the plaza area, so people would then say, well, let's go down and explore that, or maybe have some directional signs that would make that happen.
Okay. I could see the directional signs. I'm just wondering about that, this would have to be a pretty tall structure to view it from the railroad depot when you're getting up. Well, yeah, I guess it would, yeah. I wondered about that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the next page is a lot about Wheeler Plaza, and I had a lot of thoughts about it, and so I had some question. And maybe this is more for discussion, but so, I think I'll leave what I have on the sidebar here for discussion. But I did want to ask how we square page 40 with, it seemed like there was almost a conflict, if you will, between EDAC and the survey, because the survey folks, they wanted Wheeler Plaza to be redeveloped, but then they didn't want a new parking structure, they didn't want mixed-use housing, they didn't want anything over 4 stories. There were a lot of things that, that came out on when you go to the survey, where folks said, no, we don't want those things. And when I put those in mind of Wheeler Plaza, it really puts the limits on Wheeler Plaza. On the other hand, EDAC had that as a priority and didn't seem to be bothered by it. How did you, as a consultant, weigh those two? You've got the survey of people over here, as citizens, and then you've got this advisory committee over here telling you something entirely different.
We had a focused discussion about Wheeler Plaza, and the committee talked about, or EDAC talked about, well, we have the survey that has these limits on the type of parking and height and the rest. And what we recommended to EDAC is that one of the first or next steps in looking at Wheeler Plaza would to go through a development analysis to say, okay, if we're looking at the existing development standards that the city has in hand, and we're looking at the sentiments that were brought forth in the survey, let's see what a development would look like and how we would pencil economically, and what type of potential tenants could be attracted to that type of development based upon those standards. And go through a detailed discussion with EDAC or whomever else would like to participate as to how development happens and the economics of that. And then start with that process of then identifying trade-offs that might have to be achieved if it was elected to develop that site. So, for example, if you go up in height, that costs more, change the building type, it requires elevators, it requires additional parking unless parking standards are modified. In order to accommodate that parking, then typically there's either a structure or a podium building built or an underground parking structure that's put into the development. That all adds costs, and oftentimes there are not revenues that are available then from lease income or sales income to offset those costs. So the way EDAC dealt with that issue, and our recommendation to EDAC was, in moving forward on Wheeler Plaza, whoever is retained to assist the city on this endeavor should first put together a development program, development performance and analysis, and walk them through that. So we can then start to understand what the trade-offs are for parking and height and things of that nature.
Okay. So there'd be a very public process.
Right.
I suppose it would involve EDAC, Planning Commission, eventually City Council.
And if I may add, sir, one of the things that EDAC did say in relationship to the survey is their charge is economic development.
Yeah.
Their charge is to use economic development certainly to improve the quality of life, but also to enhance revenues. And so their focus was, how do we enhance revenues so we can maintain our quality of life here in San Carlos?
On that, thank you for your answer. On page 20 still, there's quite a bit of talk in the middle of the page about Activate Bell Market site. And it seems to be leaning towards really redeveloping that whole site. And so my question is, there's not anything here that talks about what we might do in the interim. I'd hate, this looks like a 3-year process or something to bring in a developer, go through a process, draw up plans, so on and so forth. That could take some time. And already the place is looking pretty ratty and is a blight on our downtown. I hate to see it sit there like that for, as long as it would take to redevelop it. So any thoughts, anything we can put in here about what to do with this site in the interim? Well, if it's indeed to go down this road of total redevelopment?
What we had set up in terms of meet with the landowner to discuss options and deal with the leasehold interest in that site, right now there needs to be, in our opinion, dialogue with the property owner and the leasehold owner, who are two different entities, in terms of what their future plans are, what they want to participate in, and most importantly, what they would be seeking to either participate in a redevelopment effort or to sell out their interest to a different entity. Certainly you could come in and do code enforcement, You can come in and try to improve or force them to improve the looks of the building, but that all takes time. And it takes a punitive action that does not then get the other side receptive to wanting to do anything. So what we are setting forth here is you adopt this. Certainly it's living, so you can change it, but then say, let's go out and really engage these people to understand where they're sitting and how we can work with them or buy them out or whatever the case might be. Because with that dialogue, then progress starts to happen. So in terms of interim steps in that, one of our guideposts in terms of what we do as a firm and the philosophy that we take on is that you don't make everybody happy. You try to build consensus so there's not a revolt, but on the other hand, at some point, you have to make a decision and move on it. And then you keep modifying your course of action as you go through it. So what we are trying to set up here is a course of action that will be modified as it's implemented, but one that gets things underway.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Through the chair, could I just add to what Mr. Spivacek said? We've had a number of different developers express interest at Bell Market, both for grocery use and for mixed use. However, we've also become aware in the recent weeks that there is legal action between the property owner and the leasehold interest at the moment, which could take, we believe, somewhere between 3 to 12 months to resolve. So while we would agree with Councilmember Grocott, it would be nice to see some of these developers who are interested in the site move ahead with it. We think that until that legal action regarding who has control of the lease is resolved, it's probably not likely that anything's going to move ahead until that happens.
Well, again, it would be unfortunate if it sits there too long and becomes more of a blight on our downtown than it is already. I'm going to jump over to page 37, which is one of the appendix, that's Appendix C, and I wanted to ask a question about, at the top of the page, it says proposed changes, and there's item 4.761 on Wheeler Plaza to improve ingress and egress, provide additional parking, signing, so on and so forth. I didn't understand that. Is that a proposed change to something we have already?
Lexington, you can answer that question.
Guide me here a little bit.
So these changes come out of...
This is, it's from your existing code, and it's incorporated here as something that, as you look at the opportunities or the different changes that might be made to Wheeler Plaza, things that might need to be addressed.
So this is already written into our code, and we're just seeing it here again?
Correct.
But it's not a rewritten piece of code?
No,
it's as it's written currently.
Right.
Yeah, except for the last sentence, consider the...
Okay.
That's...
All right, then, Mr. Mayor, when we get to that, or I would like to remember to discuss that, because that deals with what I've got here on Wheeler Plaza regarding, when you read this, it's all about the automobile. And indeed, when Wheeler Plaza was set aside by city planners long ago and far away, it was all about the automobiles, parking plaza, at grade. We're in a day and age where we look at other things, bicycles, pedestrians, so forth. And I really think if we're going to redevelop this plaza, we should look at it becoming not just a more dense area of development, but something that's a benefit to the community, a gathering place, as Kent, one of our consultants, I forget his Kent something or other, that you mentioned in here, the guy that, not Bill Lee, but there was another fellow.
the landscape design plan.
Yeah. Talked about gathering places, pedestrian friendly, no, not Clark Kent, making things pedestrian friendly and so forth. So I think we need to, if we would, Mr. Mayor, when we get to that, I'd like to discuss that.
All right.
Back to your report on page 21, identify initial efforts to market downtown to the railroad, and we're looking at first-year strategies for the El Camino to downtown, how to draw people in. Might we also consider Right now we have architecture at the intersection, street architecture at San Carlos Avenue and El Camino. As your professional opinion, would it possibly work to introduce something like that at the other end of town, at the south end of town? Because that acts as San Carlos Avenue there with the architecture that we have that mimics the train depot and so forth, acts as a gateway, tells people your downtown's over here. Folks, I know you're going parallel to our downtown on the El Camino, but go this way. Your professional opinion, might we introduce some kind of architecture like that, say, at 1000 El Camino where the new development's going in or something like that?
Yes, I would say that would be a benefit. What we would look to do probably initially, since we don't have a lot of financial resources, is see if that could be part of a development that's going in down there. I think that what would be more advantageous would be to focus in on getting users in, that people want to come and visit, or it creates a little more excitement of something new is happening downtown. The architecture is important, but in our experience, people come to various areas because they know something's there. Oftentimes it doesn't happen because they're driving down the road and see the sign and say, well, let's see what this is about. So what we'd recommend is a combination of both, if possible.
Okay. On that same page, down towards the bottom under Downtown Objective 4, there's a statement under first-year strategies, develop criteria that all tenants in pads above certain square footage must meet, and develop the language for a conditional use permit. I don't know what you're discussing there. What do you mean by that?
You have put a moratorium that requires a CUP for certain types of development. So what we were suggesting is that instead of doing it in a vacuum, if you're looking at, let's say, developments in excess of 10,000 square feet, for example, that you would meet with various tenants, or staff would meet, whomever, and I understand their criteria of what they need in terms of size of buildings, shape of buildings, parking requirements, signage requirements, and that. So the conditional use permit program isn't developed in a vacuum. Because again, you're trying to create a situation where you're attracting certain users to your area, those that you want. And so by dialoguing with them, then you can craft the CUP language to fit those you would like to see here. So you don't inadvertently exclude people because you say, well, you can only have a sign that's 2 feet by 2 feet, and people within that type of development parameter could never accept that.
So I have a follow-up question to that, because one of the things that's said straightforward in the beginning of the report is to make us business-friendly, which one would think business-friendly. In fact, it even mentions some other cities in here that expedite building permits and the whole application process for business development purposes. This slows it down.
A conditional use permit, yes, unless the rules of the engagement are specifically spelled out.
So that they don't, if they're specific enough, then they don't need to go to the Planning Commission or
they know that this is the criteria that you're looking for, and this is what you're not looking for. And so that way, if they can satisfy that criteria, that application goes through the process quite expeditiously.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, we might want to look at that as well, on page 21. Sorry this is taking so long, but this is a very thorough report, and I tried to read it very thoroughly, so I developed all these questions, and I apologize to the council. On page 23, El Camino Objective 2, I didn't see anything in here about design guidelines. It talks about review the previous landscape and design strategy developed by Fred Kent, that's the fellow, Fred Kent, for the corridor of the El Camino. But I don't see anything mentioned in here about design guidelines, and I could be wrong, and I don't see that well. Al Save's here. Anyone from the Planning Commission or Planning Department could tell us. I thought we developed design guidelines for the El Camino, did we not?
You have those on record, but there never have been, to my understanding and what's been transmitted to us, brought to the forefront to say this is what it is or adhere to in the process. So as we have in the 3-year strategy, it says if the prior landscape and design strategy is not sufficient, then retain a consultant to develop one. So the thought is when we started here with the city, one of the things that we did is went through all the files in the Economic Development and Redevelopment Office. And we're somewhat amazed by the amount of planning studies that have been done for the various segments of the community that are mentioned here in this plan. And one of the questions comes up are we going to spend more time planning things, or are we going to use what has been planned to date and see what's applicable and get it on the ground and start making it happen? And so we've been trying to put the focus into the latter versus the former.
So we could, what was going on here is the community, what it says here, community outreach efforts found that many San Carlins think the El Camino corridor should have an identity. And the answer was, well, let's do landscaping. I guess we could also look at our design guidelines and get those formalized and in here, so we could make that a part of this program.
Well, it wouldn't be, I wouldn't recommend putting it in here.
What would you recommend?
I'd recommend if those are the design guidelines, then those are reviewed and included in your planning documents.
Okay. All right.
Because again, this is focused on what you're going to do as a business plan, and then those other things are ornaments that go on this tree, if you will.
Okay. And just one more question. You had things in here about operational changes, and this is on page 31, Objective 6, improve staff interaction with existing and prospective business owners. Might that include our dealing with the building department and contractors, architects, engineers, designers? Would that be part of that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. And let me just check. I think I'm just about done here. Got one more under, two more actually. The one's real quick. It mentions in here on page 47, use LEED, L-E-E-D, guidelines to develop citywide standards for new construction. Probably Bob's wondering too, since he doesn't like acronyms. What is LEED?
It's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and it's sponsored by the U.S. Green Building Council, and they have guidelines that developers and contractors can follow to improve the green aspect of their buildings, both from a materials use standpoint to an operational standpoint to an energy and water efficiency standpoint.
What was the second E? Leadership in Energy and
Environmental Design.
Okay. On page 46, under the El Camino Real, under uses, talks about create synergy between the El Camino and Laurel Street so people flow from one to the other. Might that include, and again, this is something that Fred Kent mentioned to us, pedestrian alleys, similar to what, I think of like when you go to Edinburgh, there's the main drag along the river, and you go back one block, and there's a whole pedestrian street that you walk behind, and you go in the back doors of all the pubs and the, whatever they have. Might that be fitting for what it is you're talking about, trying to create this synergy between?
It could very well. What this was brought up is, this isn't coming from us, but this was part of the forum that we had at the library.
Right.
And so the discussion points that you see here in this section were the high points or the groups that came together, what they saw as their priorities for these various areas. With that said, yes, I could agree with you. Some of the challenges we have to deal with is the ongoing reliance of the automobile that uses those alleys and how to interface that with pedestrians walking around.
So if we wanted to make that a priority in this document as a council, how would we, if we discuss it and decide that's a priority, how do we fit it into what you have here?
Then it wouldn't be in this section. Again, it would be in the earlier section dealing with the objectives and the strategies for year 1 or year 3 as we've laid it out for these various areas.
It would be where?
It would be under the matrix of objectives and strategies, as well as in the section of the plan that deals with, let me get to that point in particular, where we would talk about either downtown or the El Camino corridor. For example, on page 22, we talk about the El Camino corridor objectives and strategies, so we would be putting that as a strategy or objective we try to obtain within some time horizon.
Okay.
Maybe we'd study it in the first year or study it in the first 3 years.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to discuss that as well when we get to discussion.
All right. You got them marked?
Okay, everybody, you'll be glad to know that's the last of my questions. Thank you very much.
All right, Matt, thank you. Brad, would you like to go next?
Sure. A lot of my the comments or questions have to do with scope on some of this stuff. I was just start off by saying, because whenever we start to ask a lot of questions and so forth, it can sort of bring some of the momentum to a halt on this. I just want to say, upon reading it, I was incredibly pleased to see felt like a real nice combination of city staff, RSG Group, and the EDAC Commission based on some survey with the community. And I was super pleased to see a lot of momentum feel like come into this document. And given the fact that these are plans, they are living documents, and as long as we can track and move along forward on these things, that the most important thing to do is to get started. So at any rate, just based on the scope of this, I thought it was impressive, and I just wanted to thank everybody for their energy so far. And I felt like it was really nice to read it and feel like there's a lot of synergy and interest in this, and I thought that was great, and I appreciate everybody's effort. I agree with Matt that there's always a careful balance between qualitative and quantitative efforts here. You know what I mean? Whenever you talk about economic development, on the one side, you're fearful that you get so economically development-oriented that suddenly, we're living in a land of skyscrapers. On the other hand, we all know how integral that is to making everything work in town. And sometimes, again, as part of Matt's comments, and I'm sure others have thought of this as well, is sometimes great gathering places are great economic advantages to the city as well. So I think, as long as we're looking at this in a real qualitative and integrated fashion, I think we're in great shape. And like I said, I love a lot of the stuff that's in this document. I was happy to see there were objectives and in the matrix for all of these different areas. I was happy to see that you came out with specific objectives to start with, because it's hard to get started without something specific. So again, I'll have some questions about scope of some of these things, but the first thing also is in those first year objectives, I would be I'll anxiously await that next level of detail, or what are those measurable results, and what date can we put those down on. I know in our council strategic sessions, we've had a lot of luck in actually when we start to put down measurable results and who's going to do it and all that. And I'm sure that you guys are planning on that to be the next step with everybody's guidance together, but I'll look forward to that as well. A couple of the questions on the east side objective specifically. Just so we all know what we're talking about, a lot of terms are thrown around with mid-plate, large plate, big box, mid-box, large box. I don't know what other containers and sizes we can add to it, but there may even be room for an extra large big box plate. So I'm a little confused, and obviously whenever I hear big box, you think of the very large, Targets and all these massive retail things that I know that I'm not a fan of so much. On the other hand, I am a fan of invigorating the economic development in town, and I do think that we need to attract retail to town. So can you help define a little bit when you say one of the main objectives is mid-plate and large plate, I think is the way it's put in here. Can you give us some examples so we have a bearing point there?
Well, a mid-plate development would be what you're currently seeing at the old Bruner site in terms of retailers that need 40 to 50,000 square feet in size, and like the PetSmart or Bed Bath & Beyond, things of that nature. A larger plate development would be a Target, though they do have smaller size stores, Costco's, certainly Walmart's, some of those are the extra large plates, if you will, as well as Costco's. Home Depot's another what would be considered a large plate development because they need anywhere from 50 to 100,000 square feet to have a viable store. A lot of these retailers that I've named are starting to come up with new store concepts that would fit in a smaller area as they move from the suburbs into an urban area like we would I hate to say it on camera here, but would consider San Carlos. They are looking at doing smaller stores or two-story structures so they can fit their volume of sales in and have it in a smaller land area. So that's basically what we're looking at here.
So there really is no bigger box than what we're referring to as large plate. That's as big as it gets.
Correct.
Okay. And then, again, council may want to have a conversation on that one. I know for me that would not be my top objective in town, especially when we think about the qualitative impacts. The other thing, on the east side objectives, I know there was some in the material talking about mixed use, but there wasn't mixed use as an objective within the east side wasn't listed. And I realize, again, this could be a question of scope, but it seems like we may want to define for ourselves how we feel about mixed use on the east side as we begin some of these different recruitment efforts that we're talking about on the east side. How does mixed use dovetail into this, or should it be a more integral part of the east side objective?
Well, in terms of the east side, when we discussed mixed use, when EDAC discussed it, when we discussed it with staff, we realized that there's additional dialogue that's needed, as well as additional study to say where would it be most appropriate. In some cases, you don't want to just drop it in anywhere, so it has to have some basis for workability in terms of the residential certainly would work, but will the retail work? Is there enough activity going around it in South? Second, will it be something that will be located in one particular area, one particular parcel, or will a larger area be designated? And since we couldn't answer all those questions and further planning studies needed to be done or evaluation, the collective thought was come up with a recommendation that's here and then have that be an area of focus as resources permit in terms of staff resources as you move forward in implementing this.
So much of this document, as you read through it, you realize that between the Parks and Rec Master Plan and the general plan update that we're embarking on, they all dovetail together.
Correct.
And one of my comments is really just for all of us is come up with some sort of an integration matrix, because we want this to move forward. We want it, but it also impacts the general plan issues as well as other things. But I would like to see, as we launch off into activity to try to get things going on the east side and other places in town, because one of my comments on recruitment is I think we should broaden that scope within the confines here, within the definition here. But I'd love to have us have a discussion about mixed use on the east side, so we at least see where council and where we stand on it, because I think it's my feeling about it prior to discussion and hearing everybody's points of view on it is it might be a good thing for the east side. Secondly, we've talked a lot about trying to leverage the green building industry movement, and also the fact that we've got a sort of a nice, strong, I think it's in the high 20% ratio of building supply and building industries in San Carlos. I guess I had sort of expected maybe to come out of this is, and perhaps this is in recruitment, perhaps it's just the scope of what we look at for businesses in San Carlos, but I would love to see us actively recruiting those green companies as well. So to sort of expand, it seemed like the green building had a lot to do with kind of standards we want to sort of promote in town and expand in town, which I heartily agree with. But I'd also think that we have a potential leverage that might be an area where we should and could actively recruit. Did you guys consider that, or is that somewhere you think we could enter that into the objectives as well?
Certainly we could actively recruit it. What you'll find in the green building industry is that they're still getting their act together in terms of there are products out there, but there's not a lot of retailers that are selling those products per se, or people specializing them. Yes, it's coming, but the infrastructure is still being put in place. So we couldn't come up and identify, though we do have in the appendix what different cities and communities are looking at, we couldn't identify, well, here are the 5 top green retailers that you need to go after at this point in time.
It does make sense. I'd love to just see it be an element as we move forward. Perhaps it's a 3-year goal, or perhaps it's where that we expand the... sorry, my glasses are getting weaker, evidently. I think under that first-year objective, with the finance group, is really important, which is you guys identify the redevelopment agency as being a potential funding source for lots of these different things that we might want to get kickstarted. It seems like that's something we should try to identify right away. So I would encourage within that objective of the financial group to maybe try to put that on a short schedule, because I think it's a great idea for us to get right into. I just have a comment for staff on staffing plan. A lot of these have to do with, I thought you did a nice job of sort of broadening out the responsibilities across different groups and a lot of volunteerism to keep this thing alive. For staff, obviously there's a lot of impact on city staff, and I think the sort of the implicit comment to city council in the document is that there's going to need some support needed by city staff, which may need some compromise in some other areas and make it a priority over the next year or two. Is that a properly implied?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so now it's explicit, and that's fine. Okay, so again, the recruitment of businesses, the other part of the scope of that I thought could go beyond is we have it as an objective for the east side only. And it seems to me there's no reason why we shouldn't be looking at all the different, we have such a nice sort of matrix in San Carlos of different opportunities that maybe we could just broaden the scope where it's not only east side specific recruiting, but looking at the broader possibilities in San Carlos. Any comments on that? I mean, do you think we can work a way where we can broaden that objective across the other groups? Or?
Oh, certainly. Part of what we're looking at is certainly you have the identifiable resources on Laurel Street as well as with the Samstrans development. So that's going to take, as Councilmember Wilcox said, time to put in place. On El Camino Real, that corridor, there needs to be some discussion and finalization of what that's going to be, because there's a confusion out there of what that corridor should service. And if you look at the evolution of land uses, it was a highway serving commercial use. Now those uses no longer exist. So what will it be? And there needs to be discussion there. So when you go out to do outreach to businesses, you can say, hey, here's what we have in our town, and this is what our town wants to be.
Okay, so I'll leave it to you or staff whether or not in the document it seems more narrowly defined at this point. So I guess I'd look for opportunities to expand that definition of recruitment, perhaps, just so we're aware of that. And then, again, there's reference to zoning regulations, and Appendix C specifically kind of affects our general plan planning and updating. So it seems like that's probably next for us with staff is how does this dovetail with the general plan and the Park and Rec's master plan, and I guess as much as anything, that's a comment on the 20,000-foot broader planning we have to do as a city. I know we're on the cusp of the general plan launch here, so I was glad that you guys identified those things in this because it helps get us kick-started and things that we need to pay attention to. And let me see. Finally, I just, I know this is probably not something we want to inherently put in the economic development plan, but it does make sense that as we're looking at the Samtrans property, the El Camino Real corridor, and downtown, and trying to connect those is pedestrian access. Is probably a big key there, and I wonder if we should, in conjunction with this plan, start to think about how do we want to connect those things. When you think about parking overflow on weekends or nights, it seems like also the railroad area is a place where we might be able to use parking overflow. Is there a way to take a sort of integrated look to pedestrian traffic flow, bike traffic flow, and perhaps even just getting people from cars on one side of the El Camino over into downtown so we don't have to choke downtown with a lot more parking if we're bringing people in? And I don't know what that might be. It could be a couple of walkovers El Camino, like where people can walk over the El Caminos. And we can do something that could be a beautiful arch or something like that. But a design concept that takes pedestrian access and walkability and design that into integrating these three groups. So one thing is to definitely get the business kickstarted on that, but the other is some of that core and inherent design to what we're looking at. And anyway, congratulations on a well-done document.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, I compliment everyone who had anything to do with this, and I compliment my fellow council members who have obviously dug very deep, especially Councilman Grocott in the details, and Vice Mayor Lewis in some of the scope. I'm not familiar with something like this. I came from a small business, and we didn't really have a plan. Sometimes we met for 20 minutes, and that's what we decided. So I'm not used to the corporate side. Mr. Lewis who has a large experience in that side, and Mr. Grocott, who asks himself and perhaps and gets the answer. But it's chicken and egg on some of this.
myself.
Chicken and egg on some of this, and that's where I'm confused. How do we get the owners on board? And again, maybe I ask a couple of questions and you can sort of speak to it. Chicken, as I said, chicken and egg. In other words, I guess government drives this activity, because doesn't the economy have something to do with this? John Smith owns a building. He has a tenant. He's paying nice rent. What's his incentive to improve his property, or to change, or to make the El Camino Real a grand boulevard? I'm confused, and I'm not sure there's an answer for this, but does government drive this? Because what's my incentive if I own a building and I have a nice tenant on Laurel or whatever? There's empty spaces on Laurel now. I know there's brokers working to try to lease that property, not including the Bell side, because we'll just put that to a separate side, which has its separate issue of, owner or leaseholder thing. But I know there's some nice spaces apparently, not apparently, there are on Laurel. I'm confused on, and not saying anything against the plan, we need a plan, but it seems like we're driving this thing because nobody in the public is going to step up and go, geez, I got a great tenant here, but I want my building to look nice, I'm going to spend a bunch of money, and then I'll maybe get a new tenant. Or maybe I won't. Why would I do that?
Well, first off, in the example you're citing, that someone has a tenant that's paying, you're not going to get them to change. I mean, the reason why communities have areas with blighted properties is that either it fits the convenience of the property owner to have it in that position because that's the only area that he can have that type of business, or in a lot of cases we have properties that are owned by trusts or have favorable lease terms, and there's no incentive to change it. For the community good, that's nice in terms of platitude, but it's not in terms of the economic reality. What we're bringing forth here really is that with your redevelopment agency, you have some cash or some capital that you can invest. So what we're trying to do here is then say, where are you as a community going to invest that? Second, as a community, you have a regulatory regime where you regulate land use and you regulate development. In many cases, those regulations inhibit businesses from starting up. You're not aware of it per se because a lot of that happens when they come and get the regulations and say this won't work for me, or they have some interface where staff is trying to enforce the regulations that the community has come up with. Third, as a role of government, you have the ability to facilitate bringing property owners and users together. You're not going to do this universally all over the city of San Carlos. Why we have this pointed at specific sites is because we feel that there you have the opportunity to take advantage of users that might be looking to enter this market area with some properties that are either vacant or underperforming. And as a redevelopment agency, you can come in then and offer a financial incentive or offer an incentive by bringing these players together to make something happen. Some communities elect not to do anything. And that's fine. It's the perspective of the community as a whole. They elect councils that reflect their perspectives, and as such, then, that's what their perspective is. Other communities don't have to do anything because they're considered a hot place to be. And so there's users clamoring to get into that marketplace. What we're setting forth here, again, is not a panacea, and it's not going to be something that you'll be able to embrace or facilitate on every property, but instead the theory here and the philosophy is you're a governmental agency, you have money to invest because you've established or your predecessors established a redevelopment project area. You have the need to grow your financial resources, so how are you going to do that? Hit and miss, or try to basically gather the kindling together in one spot and start a fire? And that's what we're proposing.
Well, again, I appreciate, again, perhaps it's naive of me to ask these questions, but I think it's important to understand that government, in effect, drives some of these issues, or at least suggests some of these issues. Looking at the five EDAC priorities, certainly the control of number 2, the activate the Bell Market site, I think there wouldn't be a person here or in this city that wouldn't want to do that. But as mentioned by Mr. Mora, it's out of our hands for at least 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, or depending how long the parties might want to discuss it for whatever reason. We have put some government control in that, and that gives us a little leverage, but not perhaps as much as we would like. Samtrans certainly quite doable because we have control over that, and that's a project that is coming our way. Wheeler Plaza, we have property that we own. It's certainly a good idea. Landmark Hotel site, I guess if it's not zoned for a hotel, and I guess it isn't zoned for a hotel down there on 101 Industrial, I don't know if it is. If it isn't, I guess it could behoove us to make it available, as you mentioned, and people might be enthusiastic because there might be something there that's underutilized, and they could say, oh, okay, now we could do that. So you do a rezoning or you do something else to improve your property. But to get, again, and I guess the same thing would go for number 1, if it's not zoned already for certain properties, then I guess we would do that for possibly items on the east side, and again, give the incentives for people to perhaps utilize their property in a higher and better usage they would think economically for themselves. I know Redwood City just went, obviously, through I don't know what is in their 4th or 5th year of redeveloping downtown. I've been down there a number of times. I think they're doing a wonderful job. It's still struggling, but I notice across from the theater now that I see a lot of leased signs, at least, and so it seems like things are picking up, as they go day by day. Long and arduous process, and they had to go through some eminent domain to do that. And some of that might work in a downtown area like that because they had a huge downtown area and possibly some blighted areas. I don't think San Carlos has too many blighted areas, per se, certainly not in Laurel. And so, again, I'm just trying to understand the incentive for folks to get on board with this when they already have a situation and the economy is going in a certain way for them and not having a problem. We have a property at 101 and Industrial that's city-owned that is a retail site, apparently, and I've only been on here 18 months, but I understand that we're just actively digging to try to get somebody to go there, and they're not wanting to come. And so it's very confusing to me how, and again, as you mentioned, there's no panacea, and we have to start somewhere, but what's the magic, and I'm not asking you, this is a sort of a rhetorical question, the magic pill that's going to make that property, I mean, to me it's a nice site, but there's something wrong with it. It's either wrong economically or nothing, or we won't allow what people would want to put there. And so that's just chicken and egg with me. It's real hard for me to understand some of this, how the free market isn't going to control a lot more of what we would like to do all this, but the free market's going to have a lot more to say than perhaps written in this document. I don't know.
The free market will control what happens. I've been in this business now for over 30 years, and I was told by a mentor long ago that there are 3 important ingredients in terms of redevelopment and economic development. One is that if the community has the financial resources to invest, to be a participant. The second is if the community has the political consensus to make it happen. And third and most important, if there's market acceptance for what is being proposed. You can't make a market.
Right.
And it's common in redevelopment that the third person in is the one that's finally successful because the first 2 are trying to make a market that doesn't exist. So the market will drive this effort.
Okay.
One of the reasons, if I may take a moment, that Target is mentioned in here is that we have talked with the Target representatives that are dying to get into this marketplace. They'd love to move to San Carlos if they could find a site big enough. So they want to locate a store within the 101 corridor here in San Mateo County. That's an opportunity that you can elect to try to take, or an opportunity that you can say, no, that doesn't fit the image, the perception, that doesn't fit our community. So there are those opportunities that are out there that exist. Tesla Motors is looking to create a showroom space and to expand their corporate headquarters. We met with the person who is in charge of doing that. I think he said they were hiring something like 10 or 15 employees a month, and they're soon growing out of their facility. That's a decision that you may elect as a community to say, let the free market take it where it is and see where they may end up. Or, gee, can we work with the local brokerage community and Tesla Motors, because they've indicated, based upon their employee surveys, that they'd like to stay in San Carlos. Is that something as a community you want to step up and be a participant in the process on a more aggressive basis, or let the market decide where it goes? So there are these opportunities out there that are rolling around, and it becomes a function then of, as a city and a community, do you want to participate in that process or sit back and see where the market takes it?
I guess just last comment, and I appreciate, your thoughts on this, and because that's what I'm trying to understand for someone who's been in this business a great deal and worked with different cities. But to me, and again, maybe it's naive, Target wants to come in to XYZ city, whether it's our city or anything else. I would assume they have real estate people that work for them. I would assume, and again, maybe I'm wrong, that if they want to come into a city, they would go up and down the street and knock on doors and say hi, or don't they? And if they haven't gotten any positive response from John Smith, who owns the building, I guess I'm confused. How are we going to make that happen unless we go knock on the door and say, John Smith, we're going to make some incentive to you so that Target, again, I just use Target as an example, could be ABC company, he's going to come in. I guess it's just hard for me to understand how the market isn't driving this a lot more than we think we might drive it.
In that type of example, and I've had this experience in other communities, they may be able to put together a 3 or 4 acre site, and their site requirement is 5+ acres.
Okay.
So then it becomes a function of, well, to get the other 2 acres, it costs them more than their economic performer will allow them to pay for land cost.
Sure.
That then becomes a point of the interaction of the community to say, well, if we have a redevelopment agency, legally we can write down the cost of land. Is there a benefit for us to write down the cost of the land of the final acre or 2 they need to acquire so we can locate them in our community?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Write down the cost of land? I thought I took some economics. What does that mean?
That means that if their development performer can stand a land cost of $15 a foot,
okay,
and the landowner is asking $20 a foot,
okay,
then a redevelopment agency can come in and would pay the difference between the 15
Thank you. I appreciate you explaining that. Okay.
So a lot of the communities that I've worked with in the past and currently have said, okay, we have a redevelopment agency. Its purpose is to stimulate one purpose, economic development. So we're going to hock the agency, if you will, to get a user in here that's going to generate revenue for our general fund. And that's a lot of what redevelopment agencies do, is they cover the excessive land costs or excessive infrastructure costs or site remediation costs or relocation costs in order to make the development performer work for the particular user or developer that they are seeking.
Great. I appreciate you describing that, because that's, again, government incentive or whatever you want to call it, government partnering with the private sector to try to make something happen. And again, I just want to make sure that everybody understands how this all works. It's got to be together. It can't just be one side or the other side. We can make plans at the wazoo, but that's not going to solve the problem. And the market isn't necessarily going to solve the problem if we can help contribute to the market. So the partnership part of this, to me, is the biggest issue. I mean, we've got to be partners with the HIA, with the Chamber of Commerce, with the landowners, with everybody else, as you mentioned, and set up a situation that we can, just as you mentioned, that situation might be very beneficial for us, depending on the company, if we feel the community wants XYZ company to come in or be with us or something like that. Again, I appreciate, that's all the comments I have and questions.
Through the chair, could I add 2 things before you move on? First is to give an example of a write-down that San Carlos has done in the past through the redevelopment agency. I know Mayor Davids is familiar with this because he was intimately involved in the project. The only way we were able to get San Carlos Elms, for example, to pencil out was our redevelopment agency had to write down the value of that land. So what happened is the redevelopment agency bought the land and then sold it back to the nonprofit corporation, the San Carlos Development Corp., at a discounted price. And then we used HUD money and redevelopment money out of our housing set aside to make that project happen. If the San Carlos Redevelopment Agency and the City Council at the time including Mr. Davids, had not voted to do that, that project wouldn't be standing there today. The other point I was going to make is you'd asked earlier about city-owned property at Holly and Industrial. You probably recall that several months ago the council gave a land option to Land Capital Corp. to look at that site. Since that time, they've uncovered some geological problems on that site, and they've given us a report which Mr. Mukhtari and the city geologists are reviewing. And as part of that, since the site has more problems than we originally had envisioned, we may be coming back to you with a recommendation to look at the lease amount and perhaps lower it, because they're going to need to do some remediation that we were not originally aware of. So in some cases, sites can be challenging to lease just because of things that, frankly, we weren't aware of, and I'm sure in your travels, Mr. Griselli, you've probably hit that too.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have.
All right, thank you very much for all the input. Why don't we take a break up here and hear from the public, if there's any public members who would like to comment on this plan? This would be your opportunity. Yes, sir. Would you come on up, please, and give us your name and city of residence?
My name is Ben Fuller. This is my 5-year anniversary of being in San Carlos as a homeowner on Sylvan Drive on the east side. I want to thank everybody for putting together this study. I think it was extremely well put together, and I want to just touch on a couple points that I thought were particularly relevant. One of them was what Matt Grocott was talking about related to the issue of the creeks. I think one of the big problems I have living on the east side is every time I walk up and down Old County Road, I just see a flood of garbage. And at one point I did call Parviz Mukhtari about a year ago to talk about this. I see that there's some stuff going on around that, and I just think it's having the waterways, making this a more natural area, more green area, moving away from the cigarette butts and the garbage that's just flowing away would be great. So I want to encourage you guys to do that. And the other thing that I thought was particularly relevant was the discussion Vice Mayor Lewis brought up about the issue of bringing green businesses in. I think that San Carlos has an opportunity. One of the things I noticed right now about the city is there isn't a single place that I know of, other than the Thursday market, where you can get you can get actually factory farmed free. In other words, free range meats. I don't see it anywhere. Organic foods. And these are major trends that are going on now in our society. And San Carlos is, situated in a fairly central area to these kind of trends, yet I don't see a single restaurant that's offering that other than the organic Thai restaurant on El Camino. So I think bringing in this type of thing would be very attractive to some of the sort of higher level, more affluent type of revenue base that I think you're pursuing. And so I just want to support Mr. Lewis's comment. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Chris Wuthman, San Carlos resident, and I just wanted to speak briefly in two different capacities, first business and then civic. And I'd just actually like to elaborate on a couple of topics that have been touched on tonight. With regard to business interests, I am representing both John Baer of Madison Realty and myself with regard to work that we do in real estate development. And I just wanted to touch a bit on the discussion about mixed-use development that Scott Marchers brought up and then Councilman Lewis and others talked about tonight. John Baer and I actually went to EDAC in May to echo Bill Lee's economic strategy study of 2000, in which he said that the city should consider including housing among development on the east side to help meet the need for new housing in the future. We asked Bill recently if he was still of this opinion when he did his economic analysis last year, and he said he was, but that consideration of housing was not part of his assignment at that time. So accordingly, we asked EDAC in May to consider the inclusion of mixed use as a possible land use on the east side, if feasible, and they agreed and recommended that it should be considered as a possible land use in all parts of the city. So therefore, we would just like to ask that and ensure tonight that EDAC's recommendation of mixed use as a possible land use within any part of the city be included in the economic development plan. And I'd just like to mention a few words very quickly, briefly, regarding the explanation of mixed use that we expressed to EDAC. First of all, we suggested that it should be considered because it is a both-and land use rather than an either-or land use, which is to say, for example, that retail and residential can work together, particularly with the new kinds of retail concepts that are developing that was mentioned tonight. And and we also demonstrated with a fiscal analysis that we brought that mixed use can actually increase the fiscal output of a property versus what a single use can contribute to the city fiscally by itself. Secondly, mixed use is a more sustainable land use because it can use land more productively 24/7 with both day and night uses rather than only 12 hours a day and then dark the rest. So mixed use actually is consistent with the desire for more sustainable land use. And then finally, it allows for evolution and flexibility in the future as types of real estate development evolve and develop, just as we would not have thought the same way about big box retail, possibly along industrial 10 years ago. So for these reasons, again, we wanted to ensure and identify and ensure that EDAC's recommendation of including mixed use be as a potential type of development be included in the economic development plan. And then putting on my civic hat, I am a member of the board of directors of the San Carlos Chamber of Commerce. And late last year, we identified as an important part of our work becoming more proactive about our role contributing to the economic health of the city. We formed an economic development committee, which I am on, and but then we recognized that this work is too big and too important for different interests to be working on it separately. So we reached out to EDAC and city staff to suggest partnering, and we found that they were thinking similarly. So we have convened and have now held 3 meetings together in just over 2 months. And so we have gone ahead and acted on the recommendations of the economic development plan before it came to you and hopefully will be adopted. We have developed a mission statement, which I would have, but it is somewhere in my filing right now. But suffice it to say, the mission statement essentially says that we are in this for the long haul with a new spirit of cooperation, and we do think that we can, yes, Councilman Crisilla, the point that you just made, some people do control some aspects of, i.e. property, as to whether economic development is going to happen or not. But by working together and reaching out to them, we do think that we can help increase some vision and some willingness that might not otherwise be there and happen. We have invited HIA, and we hope they will be joining us. And so just one, we have concurred on the economic priorities that EDAC has distilled. And one emphasis that I would like to add to that maybe has not come across quite as strongly in those priorities and I think in the economic development plan too is the emphasis on the obviously the quality but also the sustainability of the economic development that is being sought and hoped for in San Carlos. That definitely is an interest and a concern of our partnership. So the Chamber would like to compliment city staff and EDAC on their work behind this, leading up to this, and affirm how important this economic development plan will be for the city as an actionable roadmap for the city, for the future, for ensuring its economic vitality and viability. Thanks very much for the time.
And thank you, Mr. Ruthman. Any others like to speak? Yes, Pat?
Pat Potter, San Carlos. I wanted to know how much revenue are you seeking? When you say we need more revenue, so therefore we need big box, or we need Is there an amount that you're looking for? Or is it an open-ended, we need more?
Speaking on my own, but probably for staff and consultant, I think we'll take all we can get. The point is that without a plan to enhance revenue, maintain revenue, we'll take catch as catch can. And I believe the plan is directed to give a focus to the need for revenue and to the maintenance of revenue and to intelligent planning in the process. So there is no dollar amount.
So if you come up with an idea of how to increase revenue, you really are saying, well, if you do it this way, you'll make X amount of money. If you do it that way, you'll make X amount of money. But there is no number that says, well, okay, it's okay to do this way because this way we will succeed because we'll have reached that amount of economic.
I think Scott mentioned this in his matrix discussion. There's more involved than revenue. There's quality of life. There's placement. There's issues, I always say traffic issues and other things that are involved. So it's not just going for the dollar, but it is looking at a holistic approach to taking the need to plan appropriately, considering the need for revenue on an annual basis, and how can we best meet the needs of the city, as well as determine a proper planning environment to bring all this together. So it's not a question of reaching a point and saying, well, we've done our business and now the market can do what it wants to do. I think the idea is to take a proactive stand and continue the process on an ongoing basis.
Well, my concern is that if you were to say, well, what is my vision, I would like to say that I think that San Carlos definitely needs branding, and I think the branding should come from being green enterprise zones, and I think that in the past we've determined that building companies are the ones that give us the most revenue, but I'm afraid to suggest it because then I think I'm going to get shot down because it may not bring as much revenue as Target. So I don't know how we decide.
Just let us know what's on your mind, and if that's your suggestion.
Okay, so that's how I think we should brand. I think that the East Side is a great place to do it. It fits in with the mixed-use idea that you can have those kinds of businesses on the ground floor and condos up top. That's my suggestion.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, well, why don't we return it back to the council? I think that, referring to the staff report, we have three alternatives. We can accept the report as given. I don't think that's going to happen. We can accept it with modification, and that may not happen. And we can also give alternative direction to the staff and to the consultant, and that's probably going to happen. So somewhere in the middle, between adopting it and asking for additional statements in it is probably where we'll end up. So with that in mind, Matt, you started, and you had some things you'd like to focus on for discussion purposes, so you want to bring those up?
Yes, I do, and I'm thankful that you asked me to do that first because I did want to pose one more question to staff, if I might, and that's to the city manager. And I think it might help. And Brad, feel free to follow up after I finish here. But I think Brad and I brought up some issues of synergy, where we've got Parks and Rec master plan, we've got the general plan, we've got watershed issues, and perhaps there's a way to address those with not necessarily, and I think the consultant was saying this, not necessarily putting it in here, but let's make sure that it gets done. We do, the key word here tonight is implementation. That's what I heard the consultant saying. I agree entirely. I don't want to say losing patience, but I mean, I've been through a number of processes in my years on council where we do something, we put it on the shelf, and there it sits. The design guidelines that I brought up earlier is one example. So I'd like to hear, before we get going here, from the city manager on what he's heard, and maybe some of what we've talked about, the synergy of certain items, doesn't necessarily need to go in this plan. I'm not after making this a long document unnecessarily.
Mark, does that comment on it?
If that's a fair question, you know.
I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but I'll give you a response, and then you can guide me as to whether or not you want it.
Councilmember Lewis, feel free to chime in there, too, if you...
I mean, obviously, everything that we've done in the last couple of years has been geared towards an actionable plan. Our strategic plan with who's going to do what by when. This document is intended to be along those same lines. Now, I actually see the general plan that will be a 2-year process through the Community Development Department as being a bit more generic and perhaps a little less actionable, but providing an overall guide for us as we consider land use and all of the other issues that go into the plan, whether it be open space circulation. Certainly it will get to a point of outlining specific policies and guidelines for future development within the community. But I don't see that as being quite as actionable as our strategic plan and as our economic development plan. I do think one of the things that will be helpful, though, as we discuss this and come to some agreement as to what the economic development plan will be, is the discussion that I think we're about to have with respect to some of the key strategies that are outlined within this plan. We have heard tonight, just to pick one, as being the highest priority within the within EDAC, the box, the mid to large plate development, as being a priority. At the same time, we've heard commentary that we ought to have a town hall meeting to vet the alternatives to that strategy. We've heard alternative perspectives, I think, from individual council members, and even some questioning with respect to whether or not the government has a business in this domain. I think that's a healthy discussion, and I don't think we can get very far with implementing this plan unless we have some kind of an agreement that, on that issue, whether or not those kinds of uses are appropriate for San Carlos or not. The questions with respect to whether or not, how much money are we expecting from this, or how much do we need? I don't think there's anything wrong with having a discussion about that. We presented to you a balanced budget this last year, but within the context of that, you have to recognize that we're down 5 police officers from where we were a few years back. We have reorganized and reduced, I think, the staffing levels administratively. We paired the flexibility within that budget to be able to do special projects. We're feeling the pressure now within the Parks and Recreation Department with respect to carrying on the programs that have been established there. And with the budget that we have today, we have not fully funded the equipment replacement. We've not set aside money for capital improvements that have historically been set aside during good times. Those shortcomings alone will amount to roughly $2 million each and every fiscal year moving forward. I would start there, and then if you want to start to enhance your programs, whether that be to build your police department back up, to enhance your green initiatives and your other programming efforts, you need to have more resources. I mean, the alternatives are to generate and stimulate the economy and have sales taxes and transient occupancy taxes, property taxes coming from that. On the one hand, reducing services, alternatively on a second hand, or thirdly, to tax yourselves for the additional revenues to provide the services that the community demands. Those are the alternatives before that. We've been discussing those in a rather broad-based way now for a couple of years. We're bringing it to some degree to a head here with respect to this economic development plan and trying to generate some consensus with respect to how much of an effort the city of San Carlos wants to play in trying to guide or stimulate that activity vis-a-vis allowing it to happen in more of a free market environment. And before I forget, there was some discussion. We have been talking about branding for a couple of years, and no, I don't think we're ready to include within this document. We haven't included a real branding identity or statement. But I do think that that comes out of this. I do think that once we have established this plan and we know what the council's objective might be with respect to pursuing an economic development program, that then allows us to develop the story that we know that this community has accepted and go out and market the city more aggressively with what that, whether it be a green vision or some other component with respect to the overall strategy. I mean, I think that comes out of this document once we have it in place. I look forward to the discussions that we're about to have with respect to the program here. From the staff perspective, I think we're supportive of the 5 priorities that have been identified by EDAC as being objectives. I think each of them has a place. Some of them are obviously very specific with respect to Bell Market and Wheeler. The box references, I think, are probably most appropriate on the east side, where they're closer to the highway, have better access to the freeways. We certainly think that there's an interest, but even there, I think we have to determine what kind of a plate is acceptable to the community. I mean, we see inherently the issue with respect to the survey and the committee, and we need to have a discussion as to whether or not that, which of those, if we're going to accept the large plate, the mid plate, are we going to accept it restricted to a limited area, or should we not go there at all? I mean, I think, and we can talk about it in more detail, but it's those kinds of large boxes that are and they generate a lot of money. They generate more revenue than. And in many cases, if you want the smaller activity, you need to have the anchor store. You need to have a large box. You need to have that anchor that the others can utilize and feed off of. So I think it has to be a comprehensive and holistic strategy. And I think that this document, as it's written, goes pretty close, or gets pretty close to, I think, a strategy that we believe is something that can be successfully implemented by the city of San Carlos. Don't know if I've answered your question, but please redirect it if I can speak any more to it.
That's fine.
So to set the stage, let me just bring the council back to the opening paragraph in the executive summary, which indicates that this plan will provide a business plan and guide the city's investment in economic development initiatives. That says quite a bit. It says about what you want it to say, but it does imply that there's an opportunity here to invest in the city's economic development and initiatives. So the possibility of borrowing, of bonding, redevelopment income, and putting that income to work in terms of attracting investment and potential business into San Carlos is right up in front and center. It doesn't mean we're going to do it. It doesn't say how we're going to do it, but it simply says that part of this, the concept of this plan is that is certainly a possibility. And I think that throws it into a whole other light. That's not merely saying that, well, we think retail is pretty good here, and we prefer service over there. It sure nice to have a little mixed use here. But that also says that if we really feel that that's the way we want to put the boxes, we have the opportunity with some money available to make it happen. And I think that's, at least in my years on council, we've never really considered that to be part of the mix before. So we should keep that in mind as we talk through it. But with that in mind, Matt, why don't you take the ball, and if you do have specific items on specific pages that we can refer to, that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Chris. Well, I guess, again, this is partly us just trying to navigate through this, and let me just throw one perspective on it. From my perspective, is I'd like to see us get, as soon as possible, get this horse out of the stable. I think that the longer we have planning documents and we don't unleash things for fear of what it might bring, then we bring nothing at all. And I'm not suggesting we're saying that right now, but I guess from my standpoint, I really have a primary thing that I have a major concern about. And other than that, I'd like to see this thing. I have full confidence with reviews and on the document, on a every 6 months or whatever it might be, that as opportunities present themselves, as we integrate and have these meetings and the council integrates in those meetings as well, that this will continue to be adjudicated as it moves forward. But so I guess the umbra that I would love for us to tackle this with is, what are the things that you just don't want to see it go forward unless it's changed? Do you know what I mean? So we can start it moving forward, so we have something to keep the momentum and build out there. And that, I guess that's the perspective where I'm coming to it on.
Okay.
All right.
That said, I can tell you, from my perspective, I don't want to see this thing go forward without something in here that addresses Wheeler Plaza in a different fashion, because, again, I think the way this is left right now, it's just, let's develop Wheeler Plaza, let's the developers tell us what it's going to be and what it should be, and then that's what it becomes. And again, I think Wheeler Plaza is a huge asset to the city that was put there long ago by city fathers who planned this place and said, we're going to have certain parking plazas, and that's one of them. It was all designed around the automobile, which is fine for their day and age. We don't live there now. And I think the two things that we need to concentrate on if we're going to develop Wheeler Plaza, and let's face it, when you go to the survey, it's about 50-50. Do people want to redevelop Wheeler Plaza, or do they not? And then when you add in the height issues, people don't want to see over 4 stories. People don't want to see mixed-use housing there necessarily. People don't want to see a parking structure there necessarily. Then I look at what the community is telling us, and I see it, leaning against doing anything, which I don't think is necessarily the answer. But my point is, if we're going to redevelop Wheeler Plaza, and I told this to Bill Lee when we each all had the opportunity to sit down and interview with him, I said, if we're going to redevelop Wheeler Plaza, then we need to give something to the community in return that the community wants. And there's 2 things that I see the community wants. They want the downtown to be more pedestrian friendly, and we've talked for years about having a gathering place downtown. We've got the little park, and the little park is successful, more successful than it ought to be, because it's just a little park. We need a place downtown where we can have our farmers market without closing the street. So Wheeler Plaza needs to become a plaza, a pedestrian plaza, which means redesigning the whole thing. And if we're going to go through the pain and suffering of redeveloping Wheeler Plaza, we should give that to the community. And I don't see that in here.
Let me just comment on that. I take a little issue with the survey and how the survey matches up to the plan. It's really difficult to focus the public on an item without a specific item. Mm-hmm. You talk to someone about a parking structure, and they're thinking some miserable thing they've seen in Modesto, and they certainly don't want that here. You think you call someone else's attention to a 4-story, and they might be thinking of something in the Visitation Valley. I just don't think. I think you need to credit the public with the input, but I don't think you should compromise good planning, anticipating that you've heard the last from the public. In other words, I think, as far as Wheeler Plaza is concerned, I would agree 100% that this is pedestrian-orientated. There should be wide open spaces. There should be good landscaping. Hopefully we could bring it together and bring other properties into it so it doesn't become hidden and behind the corner, but it becomes a part of the corner. Mm-hmm. And I would anticipate that that's the message that we're giving when we go ahead with the proposal in the plan. We're setting up meetings with owners. We're talking to developers. We're getting an idea of how much additional parking we can lay in there. We're talking about height. We're talking about layout. And I think your point is well taken. We should also be talking about community space and make sure that that's an important part of it. But with that in mind, I can visualize a fantastic program and a structure and a plaza that I think you'd have a 90% vote on. I just don't think that the public at large would find what I'm thinking about objectionable, even though the survey might limit me if I let it. So I credit it. I don't let it. I think we need to look with eyes wide open.
Mr. Mayor, if we were to look at page 37 and the 4.761 there on Wheeler Plaza, is this the appropriate place? Maybe this is a question for the city attorney. I don't know what this 4.761 title and page refers to, But if we were to rewrite that paragraph to say something about, right now it says improve the ingress and egress, provide additional parking, signing, lighting, landscaping, so on and so forth. It's all about the automobile. If we added something in here to, add a pedestrian plaza, add pedestrian access, could we do that here? Do we do it now? Do we do it later?
This is an ordinance, and we're looking at something that was done as part of the West Side Plan in 1994.
All right.
Back in those days, we didn't really think about the potential for Wheeler Plaza, so I see it as it certainly is a limiting factor in terms of what it says, but I'm not sure this would be the appropriate place to make that change. I think that notation will lead to a change, but the change ought to come in terms of the development opportunities here.
If I may, what is listed on Appendix C are the land use policies contained in the city's general plan and the other specific plans that have been adopted as a result of the general plan. So if you were to make a statement about Wheeler Plaza, I have to go back and look in the document and find the spot. I wouldn't do it here because you need to change those documents to reflect that. Perhaps the better thing to do is under the section of the plan that deals with downtown and specifically deals with Wheeler Plaza.
Page 20 of your document?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
That we instead focus that discussion on what outcome you would like to see there, or maybe not outcome, that's too broad of a term, what direction you would like to see that go in, and then as the land use policies and the general plans reviewed, then that overall direction can be incorporated into that.
So could that be added as the first objective in the first year to have that discussion in that planning stage, and then we'd all feel like that we could have that set as we start to look at potential businesses for that?
Yeah, because the appendix is there just to say, here are other documents that relate to this, but where you suggested would be hitting it.
Yeah, something under first-year strategies. And if, I don't. So, would we have a consensus from the council that the consultant might take a look at that and based on what he showed tonight? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Through the chair on that point, I mean, just in terms of the plan itself and the document that's before us, if we look at what's there now on page 20, first-year strategies, city staff should establish meetings with the various property owners to discuss the opportunities that Wheeler Plaza presents, have an open dialogue about the options for the property owners, the tenants, and the city. Then we would contract with an economic consultant to analyze what redevelopment options would be feasible, I trust from an economic standpoint, as to what will work, what will pencil out, and identify the anticipated public investment necessary to make it happen. So if we want it to be more of a green area, if we want it to be more of a park with less intensity, you might have to invest money in order to make that pencil out for the kind of development that you're looking at. And thirdly, to identify the developers that specialize in the type of project that appears feasible. So what we've outlined here is a strategy for getting you to where I think you want to be in terms of the nature of that project at the end of the day. What we were looking at before was what was contained within the West Side specific plan. Now, trusting that if you go through this first year and you decide that this is what it's going to cost, this is what the economics are, and we're willing to contribute the money in order to make this pencil out for the kind of development that you want it to be, less intense, more green, more open, or whatever, then you would go back and change the West Side specific plan, or you would take it upon yourself to alter the planning documents that would allow you to implement the kind of vision that you realized. I personally think this document allows you to get there without making much by way of changes, because all it does is outline a process.
However, the struggle I have with that is there's certain words in here, all throughout this document. They talk about mixed use and box, big box, small box, all this kind of language. And that presents a picture of a certain kind of development in my mind. And I just don't want to get lost in here that if the council, I'm driving this issue big time, I'll admit, because that's what I want to see. But if it's a consensus of the council that that's also what the whole council wants to see, is something that's pedestrian friendly, that's a gathering space plaza, I don't want it to get lost not mentioned in this document so that, 2 years from now when this thing's getting implemented, perhaps it's lost because, we've had an election, we have a different council, I don't know.
Just so we don't have to go on too long, I think we're just talking about a bullet point that maybe puts in part of the first-year strategy is for city staff and council to have a discussion about the vision for Wheeler Plaza. Right? I mean, you just want to make sure we have a definitive input stage on it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the only other thing in here that, if we're not going to make big, huge changes, again, I'd come back to the partnering issue and how do we create that synergy on some of these different items. When we're talking about economic development, the plan admits that, you don't want to have each, all these groups out there with efforts that aren't synchronized. And I think Parks and Rec is part of that. I think Public Works is part of that. I think our watershed plan, because the plan mentions about infrastructure improvement, so I think we need to incorporate the watershed and flood control issues, and I don't think they need to be left unmentioned in anything beyond 3 years, perhaps even in the first year. And again, I would like to see some approaches to flood control that are green and not just, let's put in curbs and gutters. So
we've had a discussion on the synergy between what we're doing here and the general plan and the Park and Rec plan. And, whatever discussion we're having, including the flood plan, that's really what you're wanting to see. So
exactly.
We're not operating in a vacuum without considering what else is going on in those various areas.
Right, because, again, on the bottom of page 12, it talks about synchronized efforts, partnerships.
Right.
So.
Okay. Okay, anything else, Matt?
I think we do need to have a discussion as a council on page 21, first-year strategies under the downtown, develop criteria that all tenants in pads above a certain square footage must meet and develop the language for a conditional use permit. Do we really want to do that? Do we want to slow down an application process? We did it as an emergency measure, but do we really want to do that as a ongoing way of doing business? I'm not sure.
I think that's a fair question. I think it really gets to the issue of how we allow business and how we review what we're getting. I tend to like it because it gives you control, and I tend not to like it because it gives you control. It's I know what control means when you throw it in the public sector. So I think it merits some discussion. I would not want to necessarily hold back the planning process because of it, but we need to talk about it in some fashion.
My perspective on this, effectively we used it as an emergency measure because we are concerned about the qualitative issue. Mm-hmm. And part of the qualitative issue is what I think kind of referred to when we talk about lack of branding. And I think in San Carlos, one of the reasons that we're so qualitatively sensitive is because we are a little bit in the middle, and there is a ton of growth opportunity here. So I agree with Tom. I mean, control can be a dangerous thing. Control can be a positive thing. I think, as we try to get things moving along, we sort of have to be stewards of what we think this kind of the qualitative question is for town, not just any development. And it may slow things down a step or half a step or something, and that's certainly not anybody's interest. And my guess is, if there wasn't a big qualitative question, there wouldn't be a big slowdown. Mm-hmm. So at this point in time, where we are in with what we need to accomplish and where we are historically, given the fact that we haven't really identified ourselves yet as a community as much as we'd like to, I like it.
So if I hear what you're saying and if I hear what the mayor is saying, the only struggle I have with this is it seems to have a foregone conclusion that we're going to develop criteria, and instead we just need to have the discussion as a council. Do we want to have any criteria?
We changed the word develop to consider, because we're going to do that anyhow through the urgency ordinance process. So we would change the first word from develop criteria to consider criteria.
There you go. Thank you very much.
Well, usually these things get accomplished. It's just amazing.
All right.
Just looking through the other list, man, I think we basically had many more points, but they're pretty well focused on those issues. So
That's right.
you okay with that?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Brad, anything, Dan?
Well, again, going with my own sort of perspective on how to move forward, because I think we need to move forward, but I have a central problem with large retail being the primary objective. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I'd like to see is, I want to avoid the simple solution. I know that it's big revenue, and I know that that's what we need. But going back to the quality of life issue, it's just not where I would love to see this community go. I think we have some big box retailers in town. I just don't want to become one of those towns that is another cookie-cutter big box retailer revenue-oriented place. So that's just my own personal problem with it, and I don't know if the rest of the council shares that. So I guess for my money, I would say, can we make that a secondary objective, not a primary objective? And that is, it's kind of a worst-case scenario objective, which is let's try to put all these other strategies into place and feel like we're giving our best effort and our best shot. I think if we were picking a menu right now of how we'd like to see, Bob, you're absolutely right that free market's going to determine a lot of this. But let's pretend for a while here that I think we've got such a great town that we might be able to help influence some of these things. I wouldn't want the first thing to come before us 6 months from now, you name the time frame. All right, great. You guys said a primary objective was big box. We got Target that willing to go in. We can, through the redevelopment company, we can write down the example of 2 acres next to a 3-acre parcel. We did it, guys. That was your primary objective. All right, let's vote. I mean, that's just not where I want to be.
Too easy, huh?
Well, I don't want to, I would like to craft the community that way. What I'd like to do is, if we ever got to that point, we can turn to fellow citizens and say, we gave it our best shot, we just didn't have a choice, so we had to grab a couple of big box retailers. I just don't see it as a first resort. So that's sort of the one thing I'd like to see taken here as a secondary objective, not a primary, and go up to mid-plate retail and see how far we can move along in that plan before we get to the next spot. So that's right.
Vice Mayor Lewis, I certainly agree with a lot of what you said. I think I harken back to when I was on the Planning Commission, and our purview at certain developments was to look at the development in a sort of a focused area, and not necessarily to make the political decision, because that was the City Council's purview. And I think the same thing with EDAC. And again, I know you'd say the same thing, but I'm sort of saying it here. EDAC was given responsibility to try to figure out ways to improve the economic development. And, it's pretty obvious that that's one of the ways you can do it. They're not, their purview isn't necessarily to, not saying they can't think about it, but the point was they're not necessarily granted it. Now think about all this other stuff along with it. And it's a very difficult thing. I have the same agreement with you. I look at these 5 items, and to me, I go to the post office every day, and I sit there and I look across the street and I go, this is crazy, but we can't control that at this moment. That's one of the ones top of the list. Samtrans, I know, is going to be, I know Councilmember Grocott and I have met, and we're going to be meeting again, and this is moving in a reasonable pace to try to see, and hopefully it'll be coming to us fairly soon, or going through the regular process fairly soon. Wheeler Plaza is another one that you and I have met on with staff, and I think that's one of the highest priorities I have. And number 5 to me is, as the consultant said, then it's a matter there, or perhaps we can government can influence certain these things by making it more attractive. It is difficult for me to agree also with number 1. I don't know that I know why it's there. I don't, this is not a criticism of EDAC. They did exactly what we asked them to do. And now we get it and we go, but, and how do we balance that off?
I think though, to credit EDAC with their work, what they really are trying to do is not to prioritize as most important, but to prioritize the entire list of opportunities into a list of 5. So I don't want to put words in EDAC's mouth, but I don't think they're saying the first thing we ought to do for the first 6 months is look for that big box retailer. They're saying we ought to do all these things. And they all relate to various aspects of the industrial area, including downtown. They ought to all go in concert. turn our eyes on big box retail, but we shouldn't give it, more attention than any of these other things as well. So if I read their discussion properly, they would like to go in step with all of these priorities. And then we'll see how it shakes out. Some of them may really take a move forward. There may be something there that we didn't know about. And we can, I can see Samtrans development, for instance, if we can perhaps get it moving a little quicker, that could be coming along real quick. And that discussion should then be accelerated, because now we've got a plan and we've got some retail opportunities and we got the viewpoint to hopefully Wheeler, and the whole thing starts to come together. So, for answering Beth's problem, without belaboring this whole thing, I don't have a problem with mid and big box as long as they're in the right place. I don't think if they're located near the freeway, people look at San Carlos as being the big box town. I think the people coming by the freeway who are going to spend good money and put in our coffers could care less where it is. They see it, they go there, they spend the money, they've got it. So I certainly wouldn't want it, on El Camino. We'd never have it downtown, obviously. Right place, I don't really have an issue with it. But I did want to make the point on priority, and I really think that these things go together, not separate, not in order, but all together.
Through the chair, and again, I'm a numbers guy. The only reason it's number one is because it got 7 votes.
There you go.
And the other ones, the other 4 all got 5. And I don't know why Bell is second and not 4th or 5th. And I agree with you. I think from 7 to 5.
I think one of the mandates was that we need some revenue, and we need to consider the economic vitality of the town, and we need to make that a part of our discussion process. So, that's obviously where the big money is. And
I agree with you. I think all these 5 are, to me, 7 to 5 is the same number. It just...
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
I agree with you, but I think that's the only reason it is the number one spot.
If I can chime in here on Brad's concern, I guess I agree with Tom and what it says in here, that I could see on Industrial Road sort of a mini mall, if you will, where you could get off at Holly and drive south, or get off at Britain, or, get off at Whipple and drive north, and hit retail all along, once you get into San Carlos, all along there. As long as it's limited to that part of San Carlos. I don't want to see it bleed into everywhere. And the other thing I have concern about, and it was mentioned in this report relative to the railroad development, in having some discussions with the developer that we don't allow things to go in there that would then compete with our downtown. And we've had that discussion here before when we, I think we caved, but that's my opinion, when we allowed Petco or whatever it is to go in over there next to Hollywood Video.
Oh, no, that's another Petco.
Because I think it competes with, we've got Bow Wow Meow downtown, we've got Wild Bird Center, or it's now something else, but, all these places that deal with animals and birdseed and dog food and cat food and so forth, we've already got it in town, and we just allowed something else to come in that's more of a, I guess that would be a mid-plate store. And so that would be my concern, Councilmember Lewis, is that we don't allow these things that would come in that would then decimate existing businesses downtown that, as the report cites, are struggling anyways. So I don't know how that addresses your concern there, but I guess I share with your I guess where I'm coming from is I share your concern. At the same time, I agree with the mayor that there is a place in San Carlos where we can allow some of this activity. People get off the freeway, visit, spend their money here, and then leave, and that's fine.
Yeah, again, there may not be council consensus on this. I'd like to see it not become one of the top priorities. That's just where I am. I wouldn't like to expend any energy in the large box at this point in time. But that's just where I stand. If council doesn't have consensus on it, then they don't. I'd like to see us exhaust all the other alternatives first.
Well, I suppose part of it, too, comes into what Councilmember Grisilli was talking about earlier. I mean, Don Tankledge would have to be willing to redevelop all his properties, for the vision that I just mentioned, he'd have to redevelop all those properties in his concrete tilt-ups that are full of warehouses and offices and tile stores.
I guess we're talking about an integrated effort, and again, we can tackle this as we go, and things are going to come back to council, and I fully believe that we'll react appropriately when things come before us. But if we're talking about potential bonding and the redevelopment agency, we're talking about some of the different integration between traffic and flood and so forth. We're talking about east side mixed-use residential, the residential people over there. I think it's hard to say any big box within the very small city of St. Carlos won't have a major impact on all of those things. But I guess between recruitment and the redevelopment agency alone, I could see us put a lot of energy into an area that I just personally would not rather see us go in. But if you guys are comfortable with moving forward, I'm also comfortable with the fact that I think we'll react appropriately at the time. Again, I just don't want to see big box retail come to San Carlos if possible.
Would it help, do you think?
Are we okay with what it is, how it reads now?
I have a
I
suggestion.
think we've lost Brad on this issue.
Well, I have a suggestion that might help, Brad. We'll see. What if we just as a matter of, how it's written, edit it and move it from number 1 to something else? So, because people do tend to, it's number 1, it must be number 1.
That pushes up the Bell Market site. That's even more impossible, it seems. I just don't think we ought to deal with the 1 through 5.
As a member of the Samtrans thing, we could make that number 1. I mean, I know we're working on that.
I think I understand Brad's point. He would like to do all this without having any additional large retailers, or big box retailers, I should say. I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Chair, I apologize. If I could ask one question of staff. If we accept this economic development plan the way it's listed, what is staff's next step? Are they going to go with the priority of 1 through 5, or is it a general all 5 together, or how are they going to approach it? And, I mean, that's sort of the way we're not going to be on the front line doing this. They're going to be doing it. How are they going to accept the workload that they're going to be commissioned with?
We have first-year strategies that are outlined in each of the areas, and that's really what we would try to do. But frankly, this last weekend I had a couple of developers approach me and asked me how easy it would be to work with San Carlos. Until we get to a point that I know whether or not we have support in San Carlos, or just conceptually, whether or not we would welcome certain types of development, we're not going to market it real hard. It would be, I think, foolish for us to do that unless we had some sense from the council as to whether or not, ultimately these kinds of developments would be embraced. And I think the way that we get there is, I think, to have more discussions. Whether it's the town hall meeting or whether it's a study session here to talk about the pros and cons of a certain kind of a concept as part of the first-year strategies, I haven't decided yet. But I think on this particular issue, I think we probably need to have further discussion with the council and with the community in order to get a better sense, in my mind at least, that we're on the same page with respect to how we're going to move forward. Certainly, we have done some legwork already with respect to Target, for example, that has been mentioned. But and from our perspective, it's a perfectly viable option for us to consider that I think leads to other retail. If it's not something that the council is interested in us pursuing, we won't make it the highest priority. We get some sense of that from just having this discussion. But at the same time, if it's in the plan and we have an opportunity to entertain that kind of development on a site that we think is appropriate, especially as we go through the rezoning and the consideration of the East Side specific plan as part of the general plan update, we'll bring it forward in that manner. But I think what I'm hearing is that there's an interest in Bell Market in doing whatever we can to facilitate and encourage that. There's a consensus, I believe, on Railroad to bring that project forward. I don't know that. I think we're all probably assuming that there's not ready demand for a hotel at the moment, so that probably we continue to facilitate, but not necessarily break the bank in pursuing. And that leaves Wheeler Plaza and the big box. Wheeler Plaza, I'm hearing a rather wide array of of different thoughts with respect to what would be the appropriate kind of development there. And I think we've outlined here a process that will help us determine what ultimately will be acceptable for that development. And I think it's a multi-year process before we really, all of those take an awful lot of time and effort. So I don't know that we necessarily would take them in the priority order as they're listed. I think we have a sense from the discussion here as to what is probably going to be the most accepted by the council, and we'll act accordingly. We will, however, have an opportunity in August as we bring forward the strategic plan to the city's strategic plan to have staff put together suggestions for you to consider as part of that plan for the who will do what by when to follow up on this document.
Through the chair?
Yes.
If I take what the city manager said in response to Mr. Griselli's question and go to page 25, it sounds pretty painless. First-year strategies for East Side relative to the box stores is develop a list of compatible and desirable uses with the Chamber and EDAC, focusing on, and this is interesting, existing niches of home improvement and sporting goods and recreational products. That sounds pretty, but I don't see anything like, unless you consider Target a home improvement store, I don't see anything like that in there. Well, so it's a matter of, would we follow the gospel as it's written here, or would we go off and do something else because the market drives the bus and Target shows up on our door and knocks on the door and says, we want to come in?
Well, with due respect to my good friend Vice Mayor Lewis, I think he's wrong, and I think we ought to keep it in. I just think it's an important part of our economic development strategy, and I don't think it's going to get out of hand. I don't think it's going to get misused. I don't think it's going to get overemphasized. But I think we need to have the idea that we do have potential property that could work very, very well, and if the right deal comes along, we should consider it.
I was going to say, through the chair, listening, of course, the comments that are going back and forth, and that's why, obviously, we have a 5-member council, not a 4-member council, and the 5th member isn't here tonight, and, we're not able to hear her input on any of these things, and that could swing it one way or swing it the other way. So, at this point in time with this document, and I really, again, you have to go back to everyone's comments, that it's a really, I think, a very comprehensive document. I guess I would come, just to move this along, I would say that leaving it in is not going to hurt anybody at this moment. And let's see what's out there, and when it comes back to us, as everyone said, we're going to get a crack at this. I don't think any of these is going to take. People are going to spend an inordinate amount of time through the city manager. I don't believe anybody's going to spend an inordinate amount of time unless somebody comes to them first. And even then, it's not something that's going to take the whole day or 8 hours a day of everybody in the city hall to work on. So. I think maybe we should leave it the way it's, agree with the mayor, leave it, and again, not necessarily that I'm for it either, but just to move along, to leave it in here the way it is, and next time we discuss this, God willing, we'll have five of us. Right. And I think, and again, nothing against your comment, because I tended to agree with most of it, but just to move this along so we can go along and
other than the mayor's comment with me being wrong, I'm comfortable with all the discussion. And honestly, I think there's enough hooks in this that we should move along. I'm the first one to say let's not keep the horses in the stable. Yeah. And I'm also confident we need public process and a lot of this stuff, so we're going to have a chance to react. So believe me, I have my own personal issues on some of this stuff, but I do think that we should push forward, and I'm comfortable with the document. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we get the hooks in there so we can respond to certain.
There's one area you did bring up, though, and we haven't talked about, and I think we need to.
Excuse me, one more thing. Would bullet point, if it's not the number one priority, then bullet point it and take out the number.
There you go.
There you go. Am I hearing that from the council's perspective, they're all equal? I mean,
I firmly believe so.
Yeah, I do too. Considering it's 7-5, it's the only one that had 7 votes. The only reason it's number 1. The rest all had 5.
We can ask Mr. Marsters about that. What do you think, Chris?
All equal.
Make them all equal. Yeah. Right. That's what I heard at the committee meetings. I think that's the way to go.
Mr. Mayor, one thing that we haven't discussed, and I would like to bring up if I may.
Well, I just had one point on Brad's follow-up.
Okay, go ahead.
We've not discussed mixed use, and I really think that's an important issue. Chris brought it up. We've talked about it before. What's our real look at housing in the East Side? or over storefronts on Laurel Street? And is it something that we want to endorse and perhaps even require? Or is it something we let the market get along with, or do we limit to certain areas and not to others? It's a big subject. But we're going to run into it, and it'll clearly over, the next 30, 40, 50 years going to define what this town looks like, by where we allow housing and how we allow it to be integrated with the business community. Now, how we do that, Mark, I don't know. I would like to see it as part of a separate discussion. I don't think it needs to go in here at this point. And this is a dynamic thing. We can change it tomorrow if we want to. But I think we need the discussion and put this, put this to bed.
Yeah, I think there certainly will be discussion of this issue when we get into the general plan. Like I say, that's a 2-year process, and I suspect we will have an application before us that will propose a rezoning. As currently we deal with these issues by zoning, and the thought is that housing and industrial don't necessarily mix all that well, or the housing next to the airport doesn't necessarily mix all that well, and so you need maybe some kind of a buffer from the residential to some of the more intense industrial uses. Well, if you encroach with housing into those industrial areas, then you need a buffer from the buffer, and so you need to look at it in terms of land uses, or our recommendation is, at least, is that you look at it in terms of land uses and what might be the appropriate and compatible uses within certain areas of the entire city, rather than, I think, certainly, like I say, there's a specific project that is looming out there. There is some discussion, but mixed use is good in the city, and I think EDAC probably heard that and said, well, it's something that should be considered, not necessarily endorsing or chastising any particular project. So we would encourage that, I think, too, we need to look at the issue. We would encourage that it be looked at in terms of a zoning and land use issue for the city as a whole, perhaps in the context of what your overall strategy is here. And they are intermixed. I mean, if you don't want boxes, for example, you put housing there, it's probably not going to happen. The uses do need to be compatible, and they need to be thought out in terms of what the overall land use strategy is for the city's.
Scott, did you have
This was really a balance for us, because we thought long and hard about this, as far as if you take something and you make it mixed use, you essentially take it from industrial to residential. It never goes back to industrial. You've lost that. But there are advantages to having the mixed use that we didn't really want to rule out. And we didn't really feel that we were in a position of we didn't want to step on anybody's toes, because this is sort of a planning issue as opposed to an economic development issue. And so from an economic development point of view, we felt it ought to be considered everywhere. From a planning view, that's another issue, and that's something that the Planning Commission, the specific plans, and the council ought to decide.
Okay, thank you. All right, you have 1 other minute?
Just in terms of the city manager asked, should we look at all these as being equal? And there is, under the Bell Market site, the idea to explore purchasing the leasehold interest. And I don't know if we could sort of put that on the front burner with the redevelopment agency.
I don't want to do that. Are you suggesting that we perhaps block out funds that we can make that work? Would that be the objective?
Yeah, just to. I don't know. I'm agreeing with Councilmember Vasili that you walk by there.
I agree as well. But the problem is that if we make that decision, we sort of sit back and wait for that to happen or not happen, and nothing else happens. I know we have limits on money, but we do move in through these various policies in sequence. And if it's time to make a decision on Bell, we make it. If it's time to make it somewhere else, we make it. and we consider everything in the process. And at that point, perhaps we know more about the feasibility of doing something that allows us to say, well, we could move here if we got a deal, but, we're pretty close over here, this is more important, we should reserve it for that, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So I don't think at this point you can tie all that down, but as you move along, I think it becomes fairly obvious.
Okay.
That'd be my...
I don't want to be a bulldog on it, but my only thought is, we've tried for years to develop that site, and I always said when we were doing it, we were trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Now, here is presented to us this opportunity, perhaps, of really getting involved with the whole site with our redevelopment agency, and we would be in charge if we owned that lease. But I hear what you're saying, so I'll go with that.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm ready to make a motion, except I'm not sure what it would be.
Yeah, what are you going to make a motion on here?
I know. But we have talked about this item.
Well, it sounds like we've actually come up with a couple of specific alterations that we might be able to approve the plan with a couple of specific alterations that we've mentioned. If we can just try to pin down, I think there's only 2 or 3 things that we've...
So we're talking about wheeler and pedestrian friendly and being a group place and a place to meet, greet, and community. And we want to take a close look at that as part of the development process. I think we agreed on that.
So that's an additional bullet point.
We more or less agreed that all these priorities are good, except we'll take out the numbers and consider it equal. We were more or less agreed on that.
We were going to do something.
We more than less agreed on that, right?
Mr. Mayor, we were going to do something to integrate watershed master planning and Parks and Rec master planning, or the general plan.
Or at least get that into the plan so that, the plan looks at the whole, holistic, I think they would call this.
There's some language in here that talks about integrating all of our planning efforts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure exactly where that language goes. I think
maybe we can beef it up a little bit so that we're actually referring to things that are in process and recognizing what those...
So through the chair, are we taking alternative 2 or are we taking alternative 3?
Alternative 2, I think.
I think you're taking out, I'd like to, with the consensus of the council, I'd like to take alternative 2. Yep. And with these side points, and have them bring back a document that we can...
Do we need a motion on that?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion to adopt the city economic plan with amendments specified by the city council tonight and to have it brought back in final form to us then. Is that appropriate?
Is that specific enough? Everyone happy with that?
I think so. Yes, I'll second that.
All right.
just for clarification, I mean, is the intent then that you would bring it back for formal adoption at a later date, or are you adopting it tonight with these changes with the thought that we would simply disseminate the final product once it's prepared?
That's the question I asked straight off.
Yeah. Well, I actually think that if we could see that happening, that'd be a better way to go, because I think there's consensus on the changes.
Well, I'm sorry, confused. Which way to go?
In other words, that we're adopting this, and we'll see an integrated document, but we basically approve the document.
Yeah, I agree. I think
so. We're not going to go back and revisit.
Yeah, I don't think we need to revisit it again.
Very good. I just wanted to understand.
Right.
And that's my motion.
All right, and I've seconded. And the only discussion the other thing, I don't know if we want to broaden the language on recruitment to be beyond just the east side, but that's another one of those things where, I think when we talk about recruiting, that we could broaden the scope of that.
I think part of Wheeler Plaza, for example, or South Plaza, once we go through the process and we understand what the project is, we're intending to, market those properties or assist in that effort.
I understand that the document doesn't limit the scope, but it also speaks specifically to only the east side, and I was just adding a bit of language to the east side and the other areas of economic development. So if we contact somebody and they're interested, I'm not so interested in that, but downtown might be of interest. It's like, or if we see a site and we want to go off and start to talk to them. So that's all. It's a broadening the scope. That's all.
If we do proceed with the motion, and if we do adopt it subject to these amendments, can we specifically re-adopt it when the amendments are in? I don't want to bring it all before us again. I think we're giving credit to the 95% of the document, but I don't want to trust the luck on what the amendments finally look like when they finally get in, and they find this document printed and now we've got it.
It'll be on the consent calendar, will it not?
But I disagree. I don't know, maybe I have more faith in folks than not. If it comes back again, we're going to kick it around again for 3 more hours. So my motion is we're adopting it with the changes and the conversation. It's being disseminated, as the city manager said. That's my motion. Because it'll just come back again, and whether it's on consent or not. Somebody will want to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think we're taking on faith that the change we discussed will be integrated.
We haven't changed. I don't believe we've changed materially what this document is. I believe we've added little cross things to it. I just don't think it's.
So I'll trust you to do a really good job on it.
If not, then Tom's going to be really all after.
We'll have to re-agendize it and bring it back. We wouldn't want to do that, would we?
Okay. And I'll be the first one to agree with you if it's not. Believe me, but I feel that it's in capable hands.
Mr. Mayor, you'll at least, we'll all get a copy of it.
Yes, we'll get it.
Yeah.
If there's a problem, we'll bring it. I mean, certainly, I'm not saying we shouldn't bring it back.
Okay, I can buy that. Shall we go? All right, I think we've got enough. Would you like to call the roll, Christine?
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. All right, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everyone. So, we're now at 7B. We have the award for the Drainage Master Plan, or consideration thereof.
Standing up.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm going to try to be brief. You have the staff report. Basically, the RFP that was issued with the approval of City Council was to try to get these properties. This is Highway 101. These are all the properties along Industrial Road from north end to south end within the Zone A2. There are properties along this El Camino, they called Zone A6 and Zone A3. There is another zone north of Industrial Road, north of Harley Street, that is designated A4. So, and south end of El Camino, this area from this arc to the end to Cordilleras Creek is Zone A0. So the RFP was specified for the consultant to try to come up with all possible alternatives to install necessary improvements to get all these properties out of the flood zone. And the other part of it was to come up with alternatives to solve the flooding of Harbor Industrial Area. As you know, they're being flooded so many years. We have done some improvements, but there's more to be done. And the other part of it was talking about the White Oak area and some other localized flooding issues. The proposals we received from PKF engineers and Winslow and Kelly consulting engineers were very extensive proposals. What you see in your staff report, attached to the staff report, is not all of it. There were resumes, there were references, there were a lot of more details in there. And some other professionals from other public agencies and staff reviewed these proposals in a lot of details, and we all came up with the decision that the proposal from Winslow Kelly was the most responsive. However, during all of this, I took the numbers from both consultants and some ideas that the staff had previously, that how much these improvements, once you have the drainage master plan, are going to cost. And you have the numbers, and we put it all together, the final number is approximately $54 million. During all this process, we were watching other cities. For some of the cities of San Mateo prepared a conceptual drainage master plan and asked the residents if they were willing to pay for it, and the answer was no. It was on the bottom of the priority list of the residents. City of Burlingame, you probably heard, they had a project of approximately $40 million for drainage improvements, and they did a survey. The survey results were positive. However, when I put it on the ballot, it did not pass. formation of benefit assessment district is very difficult and most probably not successful. So we try to give this number to City Council. As you know, there is not adequate funding in the redevelopment agency or general fund to pay for this project. So we thought, would the City Council like to have this plan in more details? Of course, if you want the consultant to do it, what the consultant will do, every item that we have listed in the staff report, you will get a lot more detail and some other alternatives, and you get breakdown of the cost of engineering, design, and construction management. Basically, you're going to get a lot more detail. There's going to be a booklet, a report, that again, the way we look at it, since funding is not available, we're going to sit there. And the other part of it was preservation of the creeks. And while the consultants were preparing that, we found out that San Francisco Bay Area Regional Water Quality Control Board, the staff, is trying to come up with guidelines for preserving the streams and the creeks throughout 9 Bay Area counties. And once those guidelines are adopted by the regional board, not only become the guidelines, then they become a requirement that the cities, through development and anytime someone wants to do something in the creeks, they should comply with those guidelines. And what the consultant would have prepared are basically what we think the regional board is going to come up with. They've had 3 or 4 workshops, public hearings, and within the next 2-3 months, the regional board, the staff will come up with draft of these guidelines. And by the end of the year, or maybe by November, the regional board will adopt those. And those guidelines will come to all the cities and the counties in the Bay Area for review, adoption. And those are the things that I think the staff, with the help of the city attorney, we should prepare perhaps ordinances, and of course with the help of flood land use and a creek committee, come up with the ordinances for the city council to adopt the ordinance that those become guidelines for creek preservation. And part of the guidelines, it has a little more to it than just preserving the creeks, minimizing erosion, all of that. So based on all of this, I think we recommend that please city council defer awarding the contract for a period of 6 months following the regional board adoption of those guidelines. Or the other option, of course, is abandon preparation of the drainage master plan or any other alternatives the city council wishes.
Okay, Parviz, thank you. And I tend to agree with your recommendation of a 6-month delay. I do have one question, though, in terms of the mapping. Who draws the lines? Who determines the flood zones?
The FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. And if you look at the areas, for example, the straight line, this is the old railroad.
Right.
And one area that if city council agrees, I recommend we will do, after we did the Britton-Howard grade separation, of course we raised the tracks and we opened it up. So this dam, if you will, is not there anymore.
Right.
So we know we have the data that these properties are not in the flood zone anymore. And this is 1,000 El Camino. However, when we submitted the data to FEMA back in 1988, FEMA required additional information and they indicated, so yeah, if these properties are not in the flood zone and the water is going to flow through under the grade suppression, what's going to happen to the properties on east side of Old County Road? And that we didn't want to tackle at the time because it was possible that some of those properties would have fallen in the flood zone. But we've done additional studies now, and later we will recommend, with the City Council approval, that we do some surveying here to find out, to determine basically that all these properties should not be in the flood zone, and what's going to happen on the east side. We've done some analysis. We know with not what the consultants have recommended, but some minimal cost, we can do some improvements that these properties will not fall in the flood zone. And that cost of doing the survey analysis, I'm thinking about the range of $25,000 to $50,000, and we would recommend that we should do that to get these properties that are not really in the flood zone, to get them out of the flood zone.
And that would be certainly helpful for insurance purposes. The question that I have is what we're trying to do in this $54 million price tag is to get rid of all the black areas. In other words, wipe out the floodplain.
Exactly.
Including some of the areas in the White Oaks, and although they may not be in the floodplain, they're in the
But there is
problem
flooding in the
area.
South Laurel. Part of it is because there is not adequate storm drain system there. So that was the
So does it refer to the 100-year storm or the 300-year storm or whatever the 100-year
all of these, of course, have to be 100-year storm.
100-year storm.
But the White Oak area requires only to design a system with 30-year storm will solve some of the flooding of the South Laurel.
Okay. Any questions for Parviz?
It's sort of an English question. What you're saying is that you expect the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Board to come up with their adoption of their amendments possibly in November or December.
Correct.
And what you're asking in this first option then is to delay another 6 months. So in effect, what we're doing is we're doing it about 10 months to a year.
Yes, the reason for that is...
Make sure I understood the English here. It's not 6 months, they're going to adopt it, and then we're going to possibly come back and be... This is basically a 6-month delay after they adopt.
Yes.
And the reason for that, I assume, and again, I guess it's obvious, but is that then that'll give us some time to analyze what the adoption is, what the requirements are, so that we'll be able to go out with a better RFP to identify what we want to do.
With the better RFP, and we have to analyze that and see, does it really apply, for example, to all the creeks, Cordilleras Creek, which is a vertical cut. Where does it apply? Is it really feasible and practical? And we look at all of those, and then hopefully within that 6 months, or maybe 3 months, the maximum 6 months, we'll come back to City Council with some recommendations.
But in effect, what we're asking for, the 6 month, it's approximately a 10-month delay from today.
Yes.
I just want to make sure everybody understood that it wasn't 6 months from now. Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Parviz.
And through the chair, I mean, I don't know that we would recommend that we do a full RFP depending upon what comes from the regional board. It may be something that we would simply want to work with the preferred consultant and come back with you with a revised.
Okay, I threw some extra words in there, but the basic concept, I just wanted everybody to understand, it's not 6 months from now, it's 6 months after they adopt, is what you're, and again, it could be less than 6 months. I appreciate that.
Right. Anything else?
I appreciate the clarification, though I read it differently the first time, so I appreciate the clarification. Is there any projects that are going to be delayed in anticipation of this coming winter that we're not going to get to because of waiting?
The only other project that, again, in the future, we will recommend the City Council authorize the staff to proceed is we identify some localized flooding. Basically, one of them is 900 block of Elm, 900 block of Rosewood. There are no storm drain systems there, and the gutters get flooded. And so that would not cost as much as the consultants have recommended. We will recommend that we do a survey. Once we have the survey of the streets and the profile of the streets and all that, staff can come back with a sort of design, what should be done. We would recommend doing that, again, cost of maybe $20,000.
Is it possible to get that done by this next winter?
By next winter, yes. Surveying and even conceptual design, yes, it can be done.
Okay, but not the work before this winter?
By the time we get the design, maybe we are in the rainy season or October, November. Then
I'm just trying to, what the most immediate problems are and how quickly can we address those, and I want to make sure we're not holding up.
That really, we would recommend that we proceed with that section. As I said, it's not going to be very expensive. Maybe we can do one block at a time, for example, Elm Street in 2008 and then Rosewood in 2009, because all of it is general fund, is not RTA.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yours?
And just one question, based on what the city manager had said, could it be, if we go forward and follow this recommendation and defer, that we wouldn't, that we also might end up 6 months down the road, 10 months down the road, just not doing a drainage master plan at all? Did I hear that?
Yes, that's up to the city council, of course.
That would be your choice.
In 6 or 10 months.
Right. I mean, there are just a couple of issues. One being we're anticipating the new rules and regulations. So that's one reason that we think that we should defer so that we've got that. You wouldn't want to do a drainage master plan that would be inconsistent with new rules and regs that are being provided to you now. So that's one thought. The other thought is that we're going to be doing a survey. We've got a committee of council members that are preparing a survey of residents. I think, haven't seen the final document yet, but one opportunity would be for us to ask a question of the residents as to where this fits on the priority scale of things that they might be interested in helping us fund. I mean, we don't have readily available funding sources for this project. There aren't grants that are readily available for us. So the assessment district is one thought. We know that some of our neighboring communities have not been successful, but one thought is that part of the survey document might be able to get a sense in this community as to how important this issue is and whether or not people are willing to pay for that. So those two pieces of information together would be more information for you in 6 months or so, a bit longer, that would I think, help you make a better determination at that time as to whether or not you wanted to spend this kind of money on this master plan, or if you wanted to take an alternative approach at that time.
Okay. I just, to my fellow council members, I would just reiterate that I didn't agree with this master plan scheme to begin with, because I agreed with Mr. Matterman, the chair of the Flooding and Land Use Committee, that what this does is it says, here's some flooding areas, we're going to do a master plan for the flooding areas. And that's not at all what FLUC wanted. FLUC was recommending to us that we look at the whole city as a watershed area and even incorporate the fact that the county areas come into our creeks, but that we look at a, fully global, citywide drainage master plan, instead of just focusing on, well, here's where we have flooding problems and let's try to deal with that. So I guess I'm a little conflicted here, because yes, I don't want to go forward with this, but at the same time, 6 months from now when we look at this, I also don't want to just say we're not going to do a drainage master plan. I think we should. I think we should do it based on the recommendation that FLUC gave us.
I think that, I think you got a good point. I think also the question of having this information from the state will help the process. I think the thing that concerns me is if we went to the expanded plan, we're probably talking about more money than $250,000, and we're probably talking about more curing costs than $54 million. And quite honestly, I'm not sure if it's possible to raise that kind of money amongst the taxpayers of San Carlos for a project of this type, regardless of what the situation is. I would hope that we could make some partial cures along the way to solve perhaps neighborhood issues. I think that would be entirely appropriate. But, well, I don't know, Matt.
Well, that's
I don't know how you ever get to the big number.
Well, you don't. And exactly what you just said about once you know what the big issues are, then you take piece by piece and address those, hitting the critical ones first. But again, I think after, Mr. Mayor, after you read this article about how Seattle is doing it, and they did sort of a demonstration project in one area, and then they moved out from there, and so they're finding a more natural way to deal with flooding and watershed, as opposed to just putting in culverts and doing engineering, straight up engineering.
I think that's true. That kind of reminds me of the Highland Canal through South Denver. It's served a great flood barrier purpose.
We need a motion?
I think
so long.
We've had enough discussion.
Make a motion to defer awarding the contract for the drainage master plan for a period of 6 months following the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Control adoption amendment to water control plan.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to extend the meeting past 10:30.
Very good. We're almost finished, though. I think we're almost finished. We have item 8A next, which is the Resolution Redevelopment Agency regarding the use of funds for use of housing funds.
Yeah.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. State redevelopment law requires that cities determine and report that planning and administrative expenses in the agency's low and moderate income housing fund were actually used and necessary for the production of affordable housing and improvement of affordable housing. And because San Carlos, like many cities in the state of California, do need to use those monies from the housing fund for the creation and implementation of their housing programs, state law requires that the city prove it and say what we did with the money and adopt a resolution explaining it. So the report in your packet contains a detailed explanation of how the city of San Carlos used working capital in the housing fund during the last fiscal year, and why these expenditures were necessary for the production, improvement, and preservation of affordable housing in the city of San Carlos. So during the fiscal year of 05-06, the redevelopment agency of the city spent $330,235 on planning and general administrative expenses from the agency's housing fund for the creation or implementation or maintenance of affordable housing. These funds were spent on salaries and wages and related costs of agency staff, as well as consultants for various housing programs and functions. This is essentially a house cleaning effort that state redevelopment law requires, and it requires that the agency report how the money was spent, and then that the redevelopment agency adopt a resolution. And so staff is recommending that the agency adopt the resolution of the City of San Carlos determining that the planning and administrative expenses paid from the low and moderate income housing fund during the last fiscal year were necessary for the production, improvement, preservation of affordable housing. And that concludes the staff report, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Very good. Any questions for Al?
I have a couple of questions. So is this the time that we would approve, or is this just something we missed and we should have approved before 2005, 2006? It's like forever. It was like over a year ago.
It's time to do it.
Will we do this every year, or will we do it earlier? And I'm not critical. I mean, things can slip through. I mean, the crack. I'm just asking.
Yes, it should be done on an annual basis, and perhaps we are a little bit behind, but we're fine. We'll be legal as soon as the agency.
And the other question is, did we produce any affordable housing that year?
In terms of units, not necessarily in terms of units, but we did forward housing through efforts throughout the city. For instance, participated in the housing endowment and
right. I'm sorry. It was a yes or no question.
Sure.
I'm again not jumping on you, Al. You just came here a few months ago. I'm just asking. Did we produce any units?
No, not in the last year that I'm aware of.
Hopefully, we're going to produce some this year.
Yes, we're hopeful.
Great. That's great.
I think I'm not sure when the hacienda was complete, but there are 18 or so affordable units in the hacienda, and I think perhaps that was during that time period.
When we get to 06, 07, maybe we did.
Yeah, maybe in 06, 07. Is that right? That's true. That's true. Thank you. That's all I had. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Any others? Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Do you need a resolution number? Yes. Motion to approve resolution number
RDA 145.
145.
RDA 145.
All right.
Second.
We have a second. We have a roll call.
Councilmember Silly?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Davids?
Yes. Well, that brings us back to the consent calendar, item C and item I. First take item C. Matt, you had a question on that?
Yeah, I did. Actually, it's too bad the police department's not here again, but when I read through this, this is the case of Tanya Estores, and I realize I'll stay up front. It's rather unusual for a council member probably to pull one of these and question it and so forth. But when I read her statement here, I could almost see why ABAG would refuse it, because it has to do with fees from impounding her vehicle, and it was stated that her vehicle was impounded because it was needed for a crime investigation, and then it turned out, if her story is correct, that it wasn't needed for a crime investigation, which means it shouldn't have been impounded in the first place, which means she shouldn't have incurred these expenses. And to read her story, she sounds, I don't know who she is, but it sounds like she's a college kid or something, doesn't have the means to pay this. And rather than go through this whole thing with insurance, I suppose we could, if the police department made a mistake, just waive the fees. I don't know. But I don't want to get into something that we shouldn't get into, but
I think the reference,
do read this stuff. And
I think the reference, if her story is correct, is probably the appropriate reference. And perhaps I think what we do is what we do in terms of denying the claims, but I think an appropriate discussion with the commander on the issue would be time well spent, yeah. I read through the same thing, and if she's saying the truth, then we screwed up. But
Mr. Mayor, this is a sort of a routine action by the council to deny these types of claims. The time to negotiate or discuss the facts of the case comes later. Typically, I mean, we have the initial complaint, the claim from the citizen or the person that's affected, and then what happens is ABAG either negotiates a settlement of the claim, or it becomes an action lawsuit. This just what you're doing tonight is you're starting the clock running on a claim. Someone who makes a claim against the city has 6 months to file a lawsuit against the city. That's what the purpose of this is. Otherwise, it would be the ordinary statute of limitations. This drives the process. It's just part of the ordinary process of evaluating a claim. When you're discussing it tonight, we don't know all the facts of the case. We don't know. This is just the claimant's side of the story. It's typically they're not under penalty of perjury. So, I mean, we don't know if it's a complete story either. So.
I have a question, though, because this person is out the $800 already. I mean, if I understand this story correctly, she did have to pay and come up with the money.
But we don't know if the city's liable for that by any action. We just know their claim.
Correct. Is there any way to? I understand what you're saying.
Talk about a closed session, but it's not something that you talk about.
The other thing I would add to Mr. Ruman's comments, and as the city's former risk manager, although again, as he said, I'm not familiar with this particular case, but it's been my experience that when the city is confident that it is our responsibility, we will in fact settle it before it gets to this stage. In an instance where we don't believe it's our responsibility, we normally deny the claim. So I would take that under advisement as well.
So what you're saying, Mr. Moore, is basically we won't see every claim that's filed. I don't know, maybe most of them we will, but we won't see every claim because there may be some claims that's already been settled and we'll never see it.
That's absolutely correct. If the city believes that we're culpable, we will settle a claim before you ever see it.
I understand. Okay, thank you. Because again, even though 18 months, this is only the second or third time I've ever seen a set of claims. So I appreciate that information.
So, Mr. Mayor, what was it that you said earlier? I was talking about the commander and so forth.
Well, I suggested you might want to have a side discussion with the commander and find out more about the details of the case. From what we have here, I think the request is appropriate. We do not. It carries on its normal channels.
Fair enough.
All right. Want to move approval?
Sure.
Move have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Item 9, adoption amendments to the salary and benefit schedules. Long-suffering staff has waited patiently to help us through this. You had a question, Matt?
Well, I did, because it gets a little confusing here on this whole point of who's getting an increase. There's talk about 1% increase. Almost looks like it's getting revoked later. And so if you could just talk us through what we did here. And I suppose this somewhat relates to, speaking of closed session, negotiations we had with the POA. Those are over and done, and this is a result of that. This is reporting out from that. Correct? Okay. So if you could just, this whole section on background, and especially at the bottom where it talks about 1% increase, coming back and forth. If you
Sure, I'd be glad to do that for you.
Janet, can you give us your name too, please?
Janet Bell, Human Resources Manager for the City of San Carlos.
Thank you, Janet.
Good evening. As you have before you a staff report, this report is for the COLA, or cost of living adjustment, for our employee groups and bargaining units. Some of these will become effective. The confidential management, mid-management, and the Police Officers Association are effective for July 1st of 2007. Our part-time group, September 1 of 2007, and our ASME clerical and Teamster groups effective November 1 of 2007. During the contract negotiations with each of these units in 2004, with the exception of the POA, since we've just negotiated in 2006 with them, we did negotiate a cost of living increase for the 2007-08 fiscal year based on the CPI for urban wage earners and clerical workers in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is 3.1% as of April 07. However, in 2005, the city did adopt a 2.7 at 55 retirement contract formula for miscellaneous employees. And at the time of that adoption, a consequence of that adoption was that employee contribution for PERS retirement went up 1%. The city elected to advance a 1% to employees to help them cover their increased 1% contribution, and it was negotiated during that time that that 1% would then be backed out of any cost of living increase that would be upcoming in 07-08.
So we were agreeing to sort of soften the blow to the employee for a year.
Correct.
But then we take that away in the following year.
In 07-08, yes.
That's what, I wasn't understanding that. Okay, thank you. All right. I don't, if you just want to summarize, whatever.
Do we need more information if you're happy with that?
Let me just see here. Well, there was one other thing with these 5 new class specifications approved by council, and if you could help me out with that. That was just the new management positions.
Those are new positions that have been created and approved after the 05 contract enhancement. So those compensation surveys did not receive the 1% advance that the existing classifications in 05 did.
Okay, all right. And that was part of the restructuring program.
Correct.
Okay, got it. All right.
Do we need a separate, I apologize.
We do need a motion for this, if that's...
Just to make a motion on item I, we don't have to read all these resolutions?
No.
Okay, make a motion to adopt item 6I.
Second?
Was that a second or by the way?
That was a second.
Oh, okay.
We'll do a second.
You looking for a second?
Seconded.
Well, I don't second. Then you second.
I will second.
You second it.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
Seconded, whether you like it or not.
If you don't, I will.
It's on public record, right?
We have a motion and a second. We need a roll call on this.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Priscilla?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Mayor Davis?
Yes. Thank you, ladies, for your patience. We appreciate that. And that concludes our meeting for this evening. Thank you very much. The meeting stands adjourned.